If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Almost ready. First round of fireballs on me.
You called?
Who are you?
I'm the Fireball Dragon, and I'm here to grant you 3 wishes.
Really?
Hell no! I'm here to torch your tonsils and make tonight a night to remember.
What is even going on right now?
You're in a radio commercial.
Wait, I'm in a commercial?
Ignite the night with Fireball.
What is going on here?
Please drink responsibly. Whiskey with natural cinnamon flavor, 33% alcohol by volume, produced by Cesar Co. Louisville, Kentucky.
A warmer from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Soups with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast. We've got a great podcast for you guys. Joining me in segment number 2, we're going to be joined by Curtis Rogers. He does absolutely amazing work over at 710 Seattle Sports. Taking a look at this game of basketball that we all know and love. We're going to recap a little bit of what we saw over the weekend with certainly the SEC ACC Challenge, Big 12 versus Big East Challenge. We'll take a look at a few games that are going to be coming up for Tuesday. We're also going to be getting a little bit of a lay of the land as to how Gonzaga sits after their big win against USC. We'll dive in on what was a brutal week for the SEC as well, and where they stand in the hierarchy of college basketball and what to expect moving forward, a few teams that he's feeling bullish and bearish on. And then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Tuesday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is by Twitter/X timeline at @Janet_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM. Name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline, and the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, and this first segment is going to be a very short one because we only had 6 games on the board, and I do have to record this before the Greg Peterson Experience on VSiN, which is from midnight to 3 Eastern, 9 to midnight, so I do have to record this more around 7 o'clock p.m. Pacific time, so not able to give you what we all got in Cal Poly versus Oregon State, but let's take a look at a short but fun college basketball slate for Monday. Try to find the trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
And the trend is Iowa continues to be not the same offense on the road as they are at home. 87-68, Purdue gets it done. Our DK Network write-up was the under, and for Iowa, since the start of the 2022-23 season, they're registering about 20.5 to 21 points fewer per 100 possessions, one away from home, then at home. They go 6 of 18 from three-point range in this one. For Purdue, they're able to do a nice job winning that rebound battle by a count of 41-35 as Zach Edey just got what he wanted down low. 25 points, 12 rebounds for Purdue. They did an amazing job being able to get the ball inside. They shot north of 75% from 2-point range in this one. For Iowa, you did have Ben Krikke go for 16 points, 7 rebounds, but for Purdue, just an absolute manhandling. They were able to get this game slowed down at their tempo, so a nice, clean, easy winner there. And for Maryland Eastern Shore, they're able to get within the number against East Carolina in a game where neither team could put the ball in the basket. 63-52 the final. Maryland Eastern Shore goes 15 of 52 from the floor, but they hit 2 big threes to be able to cover this line of about 15.5 late. For East Carolina, they go just 21 of 61 from the floor, so pair of cold offenses going at it. As for East Carolina, they did win that turnover battle by a count of 17-9, and you did have a pair of guys go for a double-double as you were able to have Brandon Johnson put up 15 points, 10 rebounds, and you got 10 boards and 18 points out of Ezra Usar. And for Maryland Eastern Shore, it was Chance Davis and his 13 points and 4 of 9 3-point shooting. That was able to get them to a cover in that one. You were able to get a nice win out of Alabama. As I am doing this, whether or not they got the cover, it's a little bit of a question mark. This was a closing number in the neighborhood about 25.5, so Alabama State looking to be able to cover that. As currently, as I do this with a minute remaining, they're down 89-64. You certainly got an under, and you do want to be noting with these Arkansas State games, they've been setting some sky sky-high totals on them, and I believe that is now their 6th straight under after they had given up 100 points to Wisconsin to begin the season. They put up 100 points against Alcorn State, so that really threw things out of whack. And as I do this in the remaining few seconds, Alabama 13 of 30 from three-point range. Just balanced scoring in general. They didn't have a single guy in this game go for north of 13 points, but they had 6 different players reach double figures, so a good team effort from Alabama, and a nice bounce back after what we saw against Clemson a few nights ago. Furman was able to get within the number against Arkansas. Arkansas is able to get it done in a game where both teams got to north of 80 points, doing this with about 30 seconds remaining, but for Arkansas, no cover on them, being about a 10.5 or so point favorite. As for Furman, they were able to go 12 of 30 from three-point range. You were able to get 20 big points and 5 made threes out of Alex Williams. Meanwhile, for Arkansas, they lost the turnover battle by 1, but all in all, they were able to do a solid job holding up down low, and it looks like Chandler Lawson really going to be a player for this team. He's been seeing more minutes recently, had 17 points in this one, so good solid effort out of Arkansas. And how about a overtime game between North Dakota State and San Jose State? Last time these two teams played, San Jose State was able to pound the tar out of San Jose State, and we'll need to update how this actually finished up tomorrow, because this was a game where San Jose State was able to go up by 1 with 6 minutes remaining. North Dakota State goes 1 of 2 at the free throw line, so you had some big time shenanigans go down here. If you had the under, you weren't going to be able to get it anyway, but that said, that is one that was very much of intrigue as well, and it does look like Arkansas is actually going to be able to cover that number, as Arkansas actually up by a count of 95 to 83 to be able to round that one out. So Arkansas, they do get the cover in that one, so I do amend myself there. In Arkansas State, they were able to get a cover, as well as we have been noticing that these larger favorites have been able to come through largely throughout the season. Alabama was not one of them, but all in all, a very good showing. And what else we've been noticing, and this is going to be a trend that I talk about on the podcast throughout the week, the home underdogs. They certainly have been lively in college basketball this season. Overall for the year, 147, 145, and 6. And you really didn't have any home underdogs on Monday. But if you look at the last 7 days, 37 and 26 against the spread for home underdogs, 58.7%. And over the last 7 days in college basketball, pretty 50-50 in terms of overs and unders, as we have now seen 146 overs, 144 unders, and a few pushes along the way. Meanwhile, overall for the college basketball season, overs still hitting at about a 51.6% clip, 666 overs, 623 unders, and about 9 or 10 pushes. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we all got on a short Monday card. And coming up next, we take a look at the lay of the land in college basketball, get a roundup of Gonzaga, some of the SEC teams that lost over the weekend, and so much more with Curtis Rogers of 710 Seattle Sports next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beeson Family Podcast.
Sports Betting Innovative Analytics has taken the guesswork and emotion out of sports betting to bring you an innovative and trustworthy resource to enhance your journey to becoming a winning player. With industry-leading money-back guarantee options backed by their sophisticated modeling, they want to introduce you to a system that's not widely seen or available to help you beat the bookmaker. Specializing in NBA, college basketball, and WNBA, your first week is always free. Get started at SBIA1.com today.
And we're back here, lovely Las Vegas, for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beeson Family Podcast. And it is always great to be joined by this man, Curtis Rogers. He does absolutely tremendous work over at 710 Seattle Sports, taking a look at this game that we all know and love of college basketball. But on top of that, this man does amazing work during the baseball season as the Seattle Mariners pre- and post-game host. I know he does tremendous work with the Seattle Seahawks as well with their scoreboard updates. He's all over Seattle sports with regards to the afternoon shows over there at 710 and so much more. And he's able to be followed on Twitter/Instagram at a kid from Kent. And I know that he does a lot of great podcasts over there at 710 Seattle Sports. And it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Greg, always a pleasure. Like you said, this is a really fun portion of the college basketball slate. Still tons of great non-conference action starting to ramp up. And also we're getting some conference play too out in the Big Ten. It's going to be a lot of fun over the next couple of weeks as we round into the holiday break. So I'm really looking forward to the slate of games that we've got going on this week and really over the next couple.
Yep, it is going to be a lot of fun when we get these next few weeks, and it's been a lot of fun to take a look at these West Coast teams as well, and I do need to get your thoughts on what are the local teams in Gonzaga, because I know that this isn't necessarily the traditional Gonzaga team that we all know and love, but I felt like they made a nice statement against USC, and though it's a little bit of a work in progress in terms of this offense, I do feel like this might be a little bit more of a balanced team than we've seen in the past, especially on the defensive side of things.
Yeah, this team right now is a very interesting one in that they don't really have that lead dog, that guy that you can just count on at a moment's notice to get you a bucket. I think Ryan Nembhard is the guy who they're hoping to. But you saw against USC, Dusty Stromer pouring in 15. Look at their top scorers this season in every game. They have not had many guys repeat. I think Graham Ike is the only one right now that has been the lead scorer for them in multiple games. Watson, Nolan Hickman, Ryan Nembhard, Dusty Stromer. I mean, these guys are getting contributions all over the place. I really like this Gonzaga team, though, right now. Obviously, they lost earlier in the season to Purdue, but I look at their slate of games going into conference play. The three that I have circled are at Washington, a Washington team that's been a lot more competitive this season, even though they've had a few slip-ups along the way. Obviously, that game against UConn, December 15th, that's going to be just a fantastic matchup between two incredible teams, two teams that are going to be rematching from last year's NCAA tournament. And then December 29th against San Diego State, a couple of just great West Coast programs right now going back and forth. All those games prior to West Coast Conference play. So it's going to be a really fun matchup for those two, or for Gonzaga and all three of those games. I know they have that game against Kentucky later on in the season during sort of the run-up to West Coast Conference play, an interesting non-conference game in the middle of conference play, but that's February's problems. We're in December right now, and I think this Gonzaga team is going to have a couple of opportunities to really pad that resume before conference play, and I think they could do it. I know UConn has been an incredible team in non-conference play, even with their slip-up to Kansas. They have been just one of the best non-conference teams in recent memory. I mean, just blowing everybody out over the course of the last couple of seasons. So that game on December 15th, definitely have that one highlighted.
Oh, absolutely. And you did allude to Kansas a little bit there, and I'm so glad that you did, as Curtis Rogers, who does amazing work over at 710 Seattle Sports, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I do need to get your thoughts as to what you made out of these challenges over the last few weeks, because we saw the ACC SEC challenge and the Big 12 versus Big East challenge as well. And I just feel this way once again after what we've all seen, that it just feels like the Big 12 reigns supreme. I thought it was a massive statement that Kansas, so in a little bit of a nip-and-tuck game, they were able to get the job done. They got the win against UConn, and I just feel like, once again, we are seeing it in college basketball where it's the Big 12 number one. I would still put the Big East at number two, and the SEC, especially with Mississippi State stubbing their toe over the weekend, Kentucky stubbing their toe over the weekend, they are finding themselves third and beyond.
The power ranking of conferences right now, it is definitely the Big 12's to run with. I just look at the talent in that conference, the coaching in that conference. Everything about it right now just screams like they are going to get a lot of bids come NCAA tournament time. Got the win, Kansas over UConn, Houston beating Xavier in Cincinnati. Even Fresno State right now, they're 7-0, beating Fresno State earlier last week. This Big 12 right now, I mean, yeah, you still got Texas and Oklahoma around for the time being. They're going to move on to, the SEC next season. But the 1 year overlap where we get all this great talent. I mean, next year there's going to be even more talent coming to the conference too, with Arizona from the Pac-12 over the Big 12. But just an embarrassment of riches for this conference. It's interesting because, West Virginia was a team that I think people thought were going to be better pre-Bob Huggins meltdown, but they're scuffling right now. St. John's picking up that win over the Mountaineers. Yeah, this Big 12 conference, everything about it right now just kind of screams like everybody's playing for second place when it comes to the most competitive conferences around, because you're going to have Houston, you're going to have Kansas, you're going to have all these teams right now. How about TCU? That finished against Georgetown, by the way, with the buzzer beater at the very end to remain undefeated. Did he step out? It looked very, very close, but yeah, this Big 12 conference right now, they are rolling in the non-conference play, and it's kind of par for the course. I think we all kind of expected it, and they're proving to everybody that this is a conference to be reckoned with.
Yeah, I mean, man, it is a conference to be reckoned with, and I do have to just go back to what we did see out of the SEC this weekend as well, because I was alluding to it. I felt like they had a chance to be able to make a statement as one of those top two conferences in all of college basketball this weekend, and for Kentucky. I still am bullish on them more so than a season ago, but that was a rough loss against UNC Wilmington, and I think we're just seeing it all across college basketball. Creighton had a nice weekend win over Nebraska, but you saw last week against Colorado State, they went cold. And when you have teams like Kentucky, like Creighton, that are so high-powered on offense, they do leave themselves a little bit susceptible when they do have a clunker of a performance like we did see against UNC Wilmington.
Yeah, that one was a stunner, especially at Rupp Arena. I mean, that's a place where Kentucky does not lose in the non-conference, and especially because they had just beaten number 8 Miami in the ACC SEC Challenge prior to facing UNC Wilmington. Maybe it was a bit of a letdown, not taking their next opponent seriously, coming off a big win against a good Miami team, a team that was in the Final Four a year ago. It's just kind of inexplicable for Kentucky to lose a game like that, just how they lost it. I know DJ Wagner was out for that game, so maybe that game is a lot closer with him in the lineup. But still, even without him, Kentucky is just leaps and bounds more talented than UNC Wilmington is, based off of their roster. So weird outcome in the non-conference. I know we saw Duke lose this weekend. We've seen other teams lose too. Just a weird weekend. Marquette losing. I think, 4 top 15 teams lost this weekend. So 4 top 10 teams really losing this weekend. So just a weird weekend all around. I love it, in terms of chaos, in terms of just absolute pandemonium, giving us some great finishes here in the non-conference play. But yeah, Kentucky, it's a weird season for them because the pressure is mounting on John Calipari to deliver in the NCAA tournament, to get past, the first round, which I think they haven't done so since 2018, 2019, something ridiculous like that. This is a prime opportunity for Kentucky to do so this season. They can't disappoint. I do wonder kind of what John Calipari's future is going to be in Kentucky. I know there are a lot of rumors, about where he might coach next. If it doesn't work out with Kentucky, I feel like every school would still be lining up for his services. I don't think he's going to move on. I don't think Kentucky's going to pull a plug on that situation just because they're always so competitive. I mean, yeah, he's only won the one national championship with the Wildcats, but it's so hard to win a national championship. Even some of the best head coaches of all time have maybe 1 or 2 national titles. So it's just so incredibly hard. But I think Kentucky's going to be able to put this one behind them and still be very competitive in the SEC.
Yep, I do think that they're still going to be very competitive, and I've been alluding to it. It just feels like every single team in college basketball, they have a little bit of an off night, and it's a big reason why we haven't seen an undefeated team in over 40 years, and I do think that is something that is going to be continuing on. As joining me on the show, we do have our good friend Curtis Rogers over at 710 Seattle Sports joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and we are doing this just before Tuesday's games. I think we fleshed out enough about Gonzaga, and they're taking on Arkansas Pine Bluff. If Pine Bluff pulls off that win, that'd be incredible, though. I will caution people. Pine Bluff has been able to hang within 25 points in a lot of these games. I'm doing this as we don't know the point spread, but I think that we've got a shot at Pine Bluff being able to cover that game. But the big behemoth that is going to be on the slate for Tuesday, that's the Florida Atlantic versus Illinois game. And for Florida Atlantic, after that loss to Bryant, I really feel like this team has taken off. And I'm not sure if you've seen a lot out of Illinois, but I've been impressed by them as well. And I'm very much looking forward to a matchup involving an Illinois team that has really embraced defense a little bit more this year, and a Florida Atlantic team that it just feels like they could beat you any which way, fast or slow.
These two teams are going to be in for a heavyweight fight here on Tuesday night from Madison Square Garden. I'm really looking forward to this game. Dusty May has his Florida Atlantic team locked in after that upset against Bryant early on in the season. I like their bounce-back win against Texas A&M, blowing out Virginia Tech, blowing out Liberty, blowing out Charleston. I think they just kind of had to get that loss out of their system here because they have really played some just great basketball over the last couple of weeks since that loss. This Illinois team is an interesting one because they're a team that in years past kind of fallen short of expectations a lot. This one, I think, because of where they were entering this season, maybe expectations not as high. Maybe that's going to work out for them coming into this portion of the season. Ranked 24th in the country coming into Sunday. Only loss this season was to Marquette. They've got a conference win at Rutgers, the RAC, one of the hardest places to play, one of the hardest places to win at for any team. And not only did they won convincingly against Rutgers. This is going to be a very, very important stretch for Illinois coming up. You've got FAU this week. You've also got at Tennessee in Rocky Top. That's not going to be a fun one either. So 2 big opportunities for Illinois to climb in the rankings this week. They're going to have their hands full with both games. If they're able to come away with a pair of wins this week, you could probably lock them in for at least a top 15 spot in the AP top 25, maybe even a little bit higher.
Yeah, I do think that is going to be so massive if they're able to pull off that win for this Florida Atlantic team. I think that they've got a lot of room to be able to rise because they're actually higher in KenPom now than they were at any time last season, sans perhaps when they did make the Final Four and for Illinois. I love what I'm seeing out of this team as well. And then I do have to get your thoughts on one more as well, because we do have one of the more unique teams in all of college basketball that is good to be going at it on Tuesday as well, and that'd be the Villanova Wildcats, a team that is currently 6-0 in games outside of the Philly 5 matchups, and they went winless in the Philly 5 matchups. Like, I have no idea how. I just can't explain it. They lose to Drexel over the weekend. They take that loss to St. Joe's. They get pummeled by Penn, and yet they're taking down Memphis by double figures. They went to overtime. They knocked off North Carolina. Convincing wins over Texas Tech and Maryland. I'm not sure what you make out of this Villanova team, because this is going to be a tough road trip to the Octagon of Doom, but man, they're one of the most fascinating teams that I have seen thus far this season.
Yeah, they've been a really hard team to kind of press ever since Jay Wright left. Kyle Neptune taking over last year, going 500. This year, the weird 6-3 start, yeah, like you said, they remind me a lot of when a 4-year-old grabs a hold of a Roman candle. Not a lot of great things can happen with so much randomness, but you just kind of have to talk your way and calm things down, and hopefully things can right themselves. But yeah, what a stretch of games they've got coming up at Kansas State, UCLA coming up at number 15 Creighton. Yeah, that's such a weird thing. I think maybe there is some randomness to playing at the Palestra, playing with the Philly 5. Those schools, they get up for each other in a way that I feel like they don't get up in any other matchup on their schedule. There's a lot to prove, especially for those schools like Drexel and St. Joe's and Penn, where, they are not necessarily, to the level of Villanova. They're going to get their best shot. They're going to get those teams' best shots time and time again, and that's exactly what happened this season in the non-conference slate of games. So Villanova in a weird spot, but I think they have the opportunity here to kind of put those games behind them with a couple of key wins here coming up.
Yep, just such an interesting slate for them. I can't remember the last time I've seen anything quite like it. They dominate everyone except for those Philly 5 teams, and then against the Philly 5 teams, well, nothing for them. But we always get everything that we can out of Curtis Rogers, because he does absolutely amazing work taking a look at so many different things. You lock it down in the Pacific Northwest. They're on lockdown when it comes to all the straight college basketball action and so much more. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you, and let people know how they can follow you on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, we've got a lot going on, especially college football-wise, with Washington making the college football playoff. I'll say this, Greg. People complain about so many teams getting into the NCAA tournament in college basketball. At least the most deserving teams get in the NCAA tournament. So we will talk a lot about that this week up here in Seattle for sure. Over the next couple of weeks, actually, because that game's not till New Year's Day. Plenty of ramp up for that. Heisman Trophy talk probably as well. Michael Penix Jr., I'm guessing, will be a Heisman finalist this week. So more about that. But then, yeah, we've got a lot of NFL talk. A lot of college basketball talk, too, as Washington hopes to stay at least competitive here in the non-conference slate. I know they had their loss against Colorado State this weekend in Las Vegas, so hopefully they can also put that one behind them. But, yeah, we've got a ton going on. SeattleSports.com is the place to be, and you can follow along on Twitter and Instagram at A Kid From Kent.
Oh, no doubt about it. It's just so much fun to take a look at this great game that we all know and love. Curtis does such an incredible job of it. He's doing a little bit of everything out there in the Pacific Northwest, and every single time he joins the show, he always lends amazing insight. So a big thanks, Curtis, for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Tuesday as we hit some bank shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It's always great to get Curtis Rogers aboard. He does tremendous work over at 710 Seattle Sports out in the lovely city of Seattle. Doing a great job taking a look at college basketball. Certainly college football is very hot and heavy out there in Washington, with the old Huskies being able to make the playoff. We've got so many things going on in the Pacific Northwest, and he does a great job of covering it all, and every single time he joins this podcast, he lends tremendous insight. So a big thanks to Curtis for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Tuesday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at unit_81, and we're going to be going in the Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the major games. The games with 3 digits on the rotation are going to be up first, and then the extra games are the games involving the smaller conferences. So this is the NEC, the America East, the Big South, the MEAC, the SWAC. Hopefully I got them all, but I think that I'm missing one or two, like the Patriot League. Those are going to be the games at the bottom. So that'll keep things all nice, neat, clean, and easy. And how about if we start out with this first game of 601, 602 on the betting board? Big one from Madison Square Garden, neutral court game between Florida Atlantic and Illinois. Illinois, a 2.5 to a 3-point underdog with your total between 148.5 and 149. And I did set Florida Atlantic as a 3-point favorite. I'm seeing one straight 2 out there. This was an opener of 1.5, but even with the move up to like 2, 2.5, I'm still going to be one to lay it. With Florida Atlantic, I've been highly impressed by the way that this team has just been so well put together. They've really been able to piggyback off of what they've done last season. There were some people that were fearing maybe we'd see them have a little bit of a glass ceiling, but stands at one cold shooting day against Bryant, and every team is going to have a cold shooting day. This team has really been able to do a nice job firing in all cylinders on offense without really going up tempo. This is a Florida Atlantic team that is very much a mid-tempo team. You've got Elijah Martin, John L. Davis in the backcourt. Both give you 13.5 points per game apiece, while combining for about 3.5 steals, but it's really been Vladislav Golden who has stood out to me. Good rim protector, 2 blocks, 7 boards, 15.5 points per game, and that's in support of a backcourt that is shooting about 38.5% from 3-point range, and of significance as well. When Bryant was able to take down Florida Atlantic, you could tell that John Carlos Rosado, he was not 100% in that game. I know that he was missing a little bit of time. Now he's back in the fold, and he's really been able to make some nice contributions for the team in those 2 games that we saw in the field 68 tip-off. A combined 17 rebounds in 30 minutes and 26 points in those 30 minutes. So I do like what he's able to bring to the table. They are still missing Nick Boyd, but they go up against an Illinois team that it really is one primary scorer in TJ Shannon and then sort of the backup singers. Now, what I will say about Illinois is you want a team that rebounds by committee. This team rebounds. Each of their top 6 scorers are giving you at least 4 rebounds per game, and out of their top 8, I believe 7 of them, with Coleman Hawkins missing a little bit of time, but he's been able to pull in their 7 rebounds per game, and that is of significance because Coleman Hawkins has not really scored all like a lot, but 6'10", he's able to pop threes. You tell that he had made a nice impact on that win against Rutgers, pulling in their 8 boards in 26 minutes. I love what he's able to bring to the table. Gives you 3 assists per game, and that takes a load off of TJ Shannon just a little bit. And this is an Illinois team that they're not necessarily as prolific offensively as they've been in the past. They're shooting about 32.5% from 3, but number 2 in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. We've got a Florida Atlantic team that a season ago, this team was in the top 40 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're still doing a relatively solid job on defense as well. So I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a lower scoring game. Neither team necessarily goes super duper up tempo. So did set my total 143. Also, it just feels like at Madison Square Garden, a lot of college teams come out a little bit cold. So looking at the under, but with Florida Atlantic, I think that they're just a little bit better put together and have a bit more in the backcourt, whereas TJ Shannon might be the best player out there on the floor. So willing to lay up to 2.5 with Florida Atlantic, and looking at the under 603, 604 on the betting board. Xavier plays us to Delaware. Delaware is a underdog of 12 to 12.5 points, 147.5 to 148.5 is your total. Set my total here at 143 as well. I'm going to be taking a look at the under. It is a Xavier team that's still in the top 75 in terms of total possessions per game, but this is not the same Xavier team of a season ago as a collective. This bunch is shooting about 30.5% from 3-point range. Desmond Claude has had to become the top scorer for his team, and you really don't have a ton down low. Yes, you've been able to have one guy average north of 5 rebounds per game, and Gaitis Nemiska, hopefully I said that correctly, the foreign gentleman who has come in, and he's been able to shoot 44% from three, but you need a little bit more out of Abdul Usman. He's only logging about 16.5 minutes per game, was a primary low post player for North Texas a season ago, 8 points, 4.5 boards per contest. Xavier team that in general, they do an okay job of taking care of the ball, but last year they shot as collective in the top 10 in all of college basketball from three-point range. They just don't have that this season. Meanwhile, Delaware, what I do like about them is that they do have a versatile player in Jalon Trent. Jalon Trent doesn't necessarily score a ton, but he's able to give you 9.5 points, 4.5 boards, 3 assists, a steal and a half per contest. That's all well and good, and this is a Delaware team that is shooting 35.5% from three-point range, but I do question how this team is going to be able to do in a step-up game, because this is a bunch that they come in having lost 3 straight games. The offense has been there. They have scored 71 points or more in 4 of their last 5 games, but the defense has really been relenting on them. The Xavier, they themselves, coming off of losses in 3 of their last 5 games, but as strange as it is, I think that's a little bit encouraging that they held in there to the tune of 6 points against Houston. You've got a backcourt for Delaware that's a little bit wishy-washy. Calvin Riley's able to shoot it well from 3, but it's really been Jair Davis having to do it all. 18 points, 7.5 boards, 2.5 assists. He shoots it only at about a 30% clip from three-point range as a 6'7", little bit of a combo player. And while this is a Xavier team that's not quite the same on offense, I do have a few question marks with regards to Delaware defense. It is certainly better than it was a season ago, and you still have Christian Ray. He's able to give you about 7 or so rebounds per game, but team's about 117th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but I feel like a lot of it has come against lesser competition. I do think that this is a Xavier team that they themselves are starting to shape up a little bit more on the defensive side of things. They haven't given up 75 or fewer now for their last 6 games. It's a Delaware team that is not really going to go up tempo, so I do think that this game is going to be bogged down a little bit, and I do think that Xavier is going to be able to get enough out of someone like a Davion McKnight, who's got an assist to turnover ratio of 3, while Trent, he only gives you about 3 assists to 2.5 turnovers per game to be able to keep it clean and get it done. I did set my total at 143, going to be looking at the under with Xavier, made them 13-point favorites, so going to be willing to lay up to 12.5 with them. 605, 606 on the betting board. Tennessee plays us to George Mason. George Mason, an underdog between 15.5 to 16 points. 134 to 135 is your total, and did set Tennessee as a 13.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points. This Tennessee team brings in more offense in the offseason with having Jordan Gainey in the fold. You also bring in Dalton Connect, who has been connecting. He's been logging just under 20 points per game. But we saw Tennessee get absolutely barbecued in that game against North Carolina, giving up 100, giving up 60 points in the first half. And certainly they are not facing the same kind of offense in this one, but does call into question what this Tennessee team is. They're 42nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, which, I mean, that's still good, but last year they were number 1 in the country, and this George Mason team is really well put together. They're playing at a very slow pace. They're in the bottom 50 in terms of total possessions per game. Tony Skinn, in my opinion, has really pressed the right buttons, and it is a George Mason team that they themselves are in the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I don't think they quite win the rebound battle down low, but Keyshawn Hollow comes in from UNLV. 15 points, 9.5 boards. She's in the mid-30s from three-point range, and this George Mason team as a whole, they're one of the best three-point shooting teams in the country at 39.8%. They really don't turn the ball over a ton. You've seen Ronald Polite take a little bit more of a backseat with his scoring from the 11.5 points per game from a season ago, but he's facilitating 3.5 assists, steal per contest. He has been very efficient, shooting 39% from 3, and he's now put in their double figures in each of the last 3 games as well. Meanwhile, for Tennessee, you've got a lot of depth with this team. I mean, Josiah Jordan-James, he's a do-it-all player. He'll give you like 10 points, 6 boards, a steal, a block, a few assists per game. You've got Jordan Gainey, who's able to bomb it from three-point range. Santiago Vescovi is able to dole it out, but he's able to shoot it as well. But Vescovi is only averaging about 7.5 points per contest. Zakai Ziegler, you can tell that he's still coming back from injury. He's been more of a pass-first guy thus far this season for a Tennessee team that they do a good job taking care of the ball. 10.5 turnovers per game, but you've had the rebounding for this team diminish just a little bit. Your main guy has been the 7 rebounds per game out of Jonas Adu. I feel like you need a little bit more out of Toby Awaka, who's only been able to give you 3 rebounds per game, and I know that he's been dealing with some injuries as well. So I just really don't like the form of this Tennessee team as of right now. You know it's going badly when You're giving up 100 points in a game, and this is just not Tennessee basketball at this point. Meanwhile, you've got a George Mason team that has been able to put in their 80-plus points each of their last 3 games. I do think that Tennessee is going to be able to hunker down on defense, but this is also a very solid George Mason defensive unit as well. So I did set my total at a 133.5, going in on the under, and with George Mason, we'll take 2 touchdowns, 14 points or more with them. So taking the points in the under, 607, 608 on the betting board. For Bradley, it's the road face-off against Akron. Akron is a favorite of a point, and your total between 139 and 140. I set Bradley as a 2-point favorite, so with them being the very slightest of slight underdogs, I'm going to be willing to take Bradley outright on the money line. Now, Bradley got absolutely lambasted over the weekend against Indiana State. I think that speaks a little bit more to how great Indiana State is rather than deficiencies with this Bradley team. Meanwhile, you got an Akron bunch that they come in having lost 3 straight games, and for Akron, just has not necessarily been too terrific on the offensive side of things for them. They have scored 70 points or fewer in each of their last 3 games. They've really had a tough time being able to get it going, as against C1 competition, they've been able to break the 70-point plateau just 3 times thus far this season. I do like what Enrique Freeman is able to do, and that is going to be tough for Bradley to match up with. For Freeman, he's able to give you 17.5 points, 11.5 boards. He's got a little bit more versatility this season, but he's not a guy that's going to let it fly a ton from 3. He's went 4 of 8 from distance, so he's taking about a 3 per game. But the backcourt of Akron, it's not great. You can tell that they're missing Xavier Castaneda. That is reflected in the fact that they are turning the ball over about 14 times per game. It's a little bit more of a mid-tempo team this year than a season ago, but for Bradley, I do think that Malevi Leons, coupled with Damian Hanna, are going to be able to match up down low with Mr. Darius Hanna. He's been able to give you about 7 rebounds per game, a steal and a half, and then Leon's someone that stands right around 6'9", and he's able to pop it from 3. He's only been shooting about 26% from 3 this year. I think that'll rise up a little bit more, but gives you 2 steals, gives you 15.5 points per game. That is a little bit of a hallmark of Bradley. They've been generating more and more steals this year. You do have a backcourt that they themselves get a little bit sloppy with it, with about 12.5 turnovers per game, but a lot of that came earlier in the season. They've been able to shape up a little bit more with that regard. And how about Connor Hickman being able to give you 3.5 assists, shooting 39% from 3-point range as well? I just feel like Bradley's in a little bit of better form with their defense right now, despite what we saw against Indiana State. Once again, I thought that just spoke a little bit more to Indiana State. Bradley currently 133rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Akron 149th, and these are 2 very proud defense-oriented teams. I do think that they are going to be able to get back in line on that, so I did set my total at 135, diving in on the under, but I do think that with Bradley having both Leons and Hanna down low is going to be able to get them in on this one, whereas Freeman, he's an amazing player, but he's only one man. So did set my total at 135, going in on the under, and I'm willing to take Bradley outright on the money line. Made them the 2-point favorite. 609, 610 on the betting board. Providence, it's the road face-off against Oklahoma. Boomer Sooner is a 5-point favorite, and your total is between 145 and seeing size 146.5. With Oklahoma, I did set them as favorites of 4 points. So here at a 5, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Providence. With Oklahoma, they have really been able to surprise thus far this season, which it's been surprising that it hasn't been via Milus Uzan. Uzan has been able to dole it out with 5 assists per game, but is really not having too much of a profound effect on the offense. As a matter of fact, I think that he's the team's number 6 scoring option. Now, what I do call into question with Oklahoma is you don't have that one primary rebounder. Sam Godwin comes in from Wofford. He's been able to give you 6.5 rebounds at a block and a half per contest, which is all well and good. And John Hughley has honestly been very much versatile for this Pittsburgh team. He's currently shooting 63.5% from 3, but I feel like what comes up must come down, and I do think that for Providence, they are going to be able to match that versatility with Bryce Hopkins, who's back from season ago, 17.5 points, 8.5 boards. This year he's shooting just 23.5% from 3-point range a season ago. That was more around 36.5% from distance. I think that that's going to build itself up. Now, I will say with Josh Oduru along Jaden Pierre, both shooting north of 53% from 3-point range, you're going to see a little bit of a fall off there. So as Hopkins sees his numbers increase, I think these 2 guys see their numbers drop a little bit, but between the 2 of them, you've been able to get about 24.5 points per game. And for each of your top 3 scorers for Providence, Oduru, Hopkins, along Devin Carter, they've all been able to give you at least 6 rebounds per game. The big key for Providence is having Devin Carter and Bryce Hopkins reduce on the fact that they are turning the ball over about 5.7 times per contest. That has been very costly for them, but they've been able to get a little bit more depth in general. Gary Duell, a top 75 recruit, is able to give you some quality minutes. You've got Corey Floyd Jr. Last year shot 42% from 3. This year down to more around 16% from the outside, but I think that he's going to be able to pick it up. That's going to help. And I just like those guys a little bit more than some of the ancillary pieces of Oklahoma, like a Rivaldo Soares, who he came over from Oregon, was a highly touted junior college guy, but hasn't necessarily been able to put it together at this level. It is an Oklahoma team that's playing much more mid-tempo this year than they did a season ago. Porter Mosier, we know him from his time at Loyola Chicago, typically likes to play a little bit more slowly, and for Oklahoma, currently 11th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I do think that a little bit of this is a product of the competition that they place. They certainly did have their hands full with both Iowa and USC, but UT Rio Grande Valley, Arkansas Pine Bluff, Texas State, they played a lot of more simple competition. I do think that Providence is going to be able to hold snug in this game, though I do think that this Oklahoma team, they're going to be looking to slow it down a little bit, which is why I did set my total at 142. I'm going to be looking at the under, but I think that Providence holds in there. Won't take 4.5 or more with them. 6-11, 6-12 on the betting board. It is Michigan State playing against Wisconsin. Wisconsin's between a 3.5 to a 4.5 point underdog. Totals between 130.5 and 131. I did set my total at 134.5. Looking at the over, got a Wisconsin team that, once again, playing very slow, very grimy, but they've been a little bit more efficient on the offensive side of things, and they are playing against a Michigan State team that I think that they're going to see a rise up with their three-point shooting. Michigan State is shooting 26.9% from three-point range after a season ago. They shot 39.5% from three with largely the same core. Now, I'm not saying they're going to shoot 39+% from three-point range once again this season, but I think that this is a little bit of an outlier and a barrage. You've got Ty Walker along with Jaden Akins combining to shoot about 29.2% from three-point range. Akins has been able to chip in there 6 boards, 7.5 points per game. Of Walker, he's been your primary scorer with 20.5 points per contest. But what I like about Michigan State is that now they're giving more minutes to the younger guys. We've been seeing a little bit more Cohen Carr. We've been seeing a little bit more out of someone like Xavier Booker, whereas Mady Sissoko, even though he's been able to give the team right around 6.5 rebounds per game, just feels like a little bit of a liability out there. Meanwhile, you've got a Wisconsin bunch that I do like what they've got down low, and Stephen Krull, Tyler Wall, these two guys have been able to combine for about 13.5 rebounds, 21.5 points per game, and Krull is actually able to pop it from three-point range. Of Wisconsin, they're currently shooting 30% from three as well. I think that there should be a little bit of a rise up. Wisconsin, as always, they do a solid job of taking care of the ball with about 10.5 turnovers per game, but you just have such inconsistency with Chucky Hepburn, who gives you 11 points per game, but feels like one night he'll give you 20, the next night he'll give you 2, and you don't have a lot of in between. And we've also seen Connor Essegian, who was awesome last year. He was logging about 11.5 points per game. Without having A.J. Storr in the fold, he has become a total afterthought for the team. It's a Wisconsin bunch that is running a very thin rotation. They're only going about 6 deep. They don't give you too many different looks, and with Michigan State now putting out there their younger guys, I feel like it's helped out this offense. It's helped them to the tune of scoring 74 plus points in 3 out of their last 4 games. Meanwhile, you've got a Wisconsin team that has really been cooking on offense as well. This is a team that has been able to get to 69 very nice points in 4 out of their last 5 games, and I do think that this is going to be a little bit more of a nip and tuck game, but I think that the upside that the Michigan State freshmen have, along with having the best scorer out there on the floor, Ty Walker, I trust in him more than A.J. Storr. It's going to allow Michigan State to be able to get the job done at the Breslin Center. I set Michigan State as a 6.5 point favorite, willing to lay the number, and I think both of these teams in for some 3-point shooting positivity. I'm going to be taking a look at the over semi-total at 134.5. 6-13, 6-14 on the betting board. Villanova is on the road facing off against Kansas State. Kansas State between a pick'em to a 1-point underdog. Totals between 142 and 143. Just a strange Villanova team in general. A Villanova bunch of which they won the battle for Atlantis. They're 6-0 in games outside the Philly 5, and they're 0-3 against a Philly 5. So I guess because they're playing a team outside Philadelphia, they're going to win this game, but I tend to disagree with that. I think the Octagon of Doom trips them up. I set Kansas State 2-point favorites, so taking Kansas State as a pick'em slash a very, very slight underdog. You've got for Kansas State just a lot of versatility in general out there. Not necessarily the most bullish guy on Arthur Kaluma, but he is able to give you about 8.5 rebounds. He's able to space the floor. Big thing is you need he and Cam Carter to reduce the turnovers a little bit, about 5.2 turnovers between the two of them, but I love what Tyler Perry is able to do. You've seen him on the silver screen, now you're seeing him on the hardwood. 17.5 points, 5.5 assists, 4 boards, just a real floor general for the team, and despite the fact that they don't have Nequan Tomlin out there, still have had David and Gesson be able to do a nice job down low with about 8 rebounds per game. Will McNair doesn't necessarily pull in as many boards, but still a nice rim protector going up against a Villanova team in which they look to play positionless basketball. You've got Tyler Burton, you've got also Eric Dixon combining for about 13.5 rebounds per game, and after Eric Dixon got off to a slow start and Tyler Burton was hot, we've seen a reversal. Burton logging about 9 points on 38% three-point shooting, and Dixon, about a 38% three-point shooter. He's up to about 15 points per game, and for Villanova, they always do a solid job doing the little things. They only turn the ball over 10 times per game, and each of the last 2 years, this team has been number 1 in all of college basketball in terms of free throw shooting percentage, but it is also a Villanova team that, even though they're better on defense this year, I still feel like they have a little bit to ascend to. They're about 73rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, this is with playing some good competition in Kansas State. It's left a little bit of something to be desired on this front as well. They're more around 120th, but I do think that Kansas State has a little bit more in terms of just size in general to be able to match up down low with Villanova. I do think that Kansas State is going to be able to get up in Villanova, and I do think that for the Wildcats, having to go into this environment going to cause them to trip up just a little bit and allow Kansas State to be able to get it done, as Villanova not going to be able to take advantage of the fact that Kansas State does turn the ball over quite a bit, as they don't do a lot of pickpocketing. So I did set Kansas State as a 2-point favorite. We'll take them as a pick'em / a slight underdog, and with regards to the total, set mine at a 142. So you're at a 142.5, 143. Going to be diving in on the under to go along with Kansas State on this pick'em line. 615, 616 on the betting board. It is Notre Dame. They play host Western Michigan. Western Michigan finds themselves as 10 to 11 point underdogs. Totals between 128 to 128.5. I did set Notre Dame as a 12-point favorite. I am going to be willing to lay this number. Notre Dame has had their issues all season long. I do really believe in Micah Shrewsbury as a coach. I think that he's going to get the most out of these guys. You've got someone that I like in Marcus Burton, who's been able to log about 15 points per contest. Currently shooting 13% from 3, and Notre Dame shooting 26.5% from 3. We know that Micah Shrewsbury is an offensive tacticianer. He does a very good job putting his guys in good spots now. He's working with a lack of talent. We're going to call it what it is, but I think that when it's all said and done, they should shoot a little bit better than 26% from 3-point range, and they're going up against a Western Michigan team that has someone in Titus Wright who's able to do a solid job with about 6 rebounds down low, so I think that he's going to be able to do a nice job on that front. But this is also a Western Michigan team that, in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, ranks right around 193rd, so I do think that there might be a little bit of positivity here for Notre Dame when it comes to Western Michigan as well. B. Artis White, one of their top scorers from a few seasons ago, just has happened himself this year. He's already missed 2 games. He's only giving you 7 points per game. He is shooting 37.5% from 3. And all in all, for Western Michigan, they're shooting 36.5% from the outside, but they've doomed themselves with turnovers. 15.5 per game. You saw it in their last game against St. Thomas. They were down 27 points on their home floor at the half. They just have not been able to get a whole heck of a lot of anything going on offense. This is a Western Michigan team that, in regulation, has scored 70 points or fewer in all but one of their games thus far this season. That takes out opening night when their game went to overtime against North Dakota State. Meanwhile, you do have a Notre Dame team that is pretty sad and pathetic with regards to their offense as well. This is a bunch that, in regulation, they have scored fewer than 60 points in now 4 their last 5 games as well. So you do have your issues there, but I do think that Notre Dame going to be able to heat up just a little bit more. I do think that with Notre Dame, they're going to be able to match up relatively okay on the glass. You've been able to have Tay Davis give you about 5.5 rebounds per game. Owen Lobsinger has been able to give you about 6 boards per contest as well with Western Michigan. But for Notre Dame, even though they're sloppy on offense, at the very least they prevent on the self-inflicted wounds like you've got with this Western Michigan offense, which is why I did set Notre Dame as a 12-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number in. I did set my total at 128. Seeing a 128.5 out there right now, I'm going to be taking a look at that under, and between a 127.5 and a 128.5, I would rather go under on that 128.5 rather than over, but looking at the under to go along with Notre Dame. 617, 618 on the betting board. Drexel, it's a road face-off against Princeton. Princeton finds themselves as a favorite between 7.5 to 8.5 points. Totals between 124.5 and 125, and with this Princeton bunch, I did set them as favorites of 9.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay this number. When it comes to Princeton, I absolutely love the overall balance that you've got with this team, and they don't necessarily go super fast. This is a Princeton team that is, well, outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. They're going out against a total slug in Drexel that, take a look at this Drexel team, because their game against Old Dominion went to overtime. If you look at regulation and regulation only, they have not allowed more than 60 points in a game in their last 5 games. It's just absolutely incredible what we've seen out of them, and they've allowed one team in regulation to be able to break 68 points. So that's what we're taking a look at there. Meanwhile, you've got a Princeton team that has gotten to 76 plus points in 4 out of their last 5 games, so it is a case of something's got to give. Caden Pierce should be able to control things down low for Princeton. 16 points, 10 boards, 3 assists. He doesn't necessarily have the same size as Amari Williams, who's been a do-it-all player for this Drexel team as well. He chips in there 13 points, 8 boards, like a steal and a half, 2.5 blocks per game. He's just an absolute animal down low, but with this Drexel team, what they're really lacking is anything from the outside. It's a Drexel bunch that's currently shooting 26.5% for 3. I think they're a little bit better than that. You got Justin Moore's giving you 3.5 assists per game, but he's also turned the ball over 3 times per contest. Your main 3-point shooter from a season ago, Yamei Butler, who shot about 45.5% from distance, is currently shooting 14% from 3-point range. Meanwhile, Princeton shoots more at a clip of about 34% from 3, and they do a nice job of just keeping things in control with the offense. 9 turnovers per game. They shoot 80% the free throw line. They shoot in the mid-30s from 3-point range, with Xavier Lee shooting about 40.5% from the outside. He's the main floor general with about 3.5 assists, 19 points per game. Matt Loco gives you 4 assists. He's been shooting 50% from 3-point range. It's not a deep rotation with this Princeton team. They play 5 guys for north of 30 minutes, and then you get a little bit of production out of Jack Scott as well, but this is a Princeton team that they do a nice job staying out of foul trouble, staying within themselves. I think that that's going to allow them to prevail in a little bit of a low-scoring slog. I do think that both of these teams have been a touch lucky with the other's opponent 3-point shooting, and I do think that Princeton is going to find a way to be efficient against Drexel, and I think that there's a good chance that this game is going to be like an 8 or 10 point differential with a minute remaining, and then you get those late game fouls. So I did set my line at a 9.5 with Princeton being the favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 9 with them. With this total, set mine at a 127.5 as well, so I'm going to be diving in on the over, and I'm going to be taking a look at Princeton. 619, 620 on the betting board. Middle Tennessee is playing us Missouri State. Missouri State, a 1 to a 1.5 point favorite, and your total on this game is there between 129.5 and 131. I did make Middle Tennessee the 2-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to go with them outright on the money line. For Middle Tennessee, they have been dealing with that Cameron Weston injury, which has bogged them down in the backcourt, and it has caused for them to play a significantly slower brand of basketball. They have been one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. And for Missouri State, we have seen a little bit of a tick up in terms of their tempo as well. Last season, they were in the bottom 40 in terms of total possessions per game. They've been closer to a mid-tempo team thus far this season, shooting about 37% from 3 to the positive, but also it has led to them getting all out of sorts with regards to turnovers. Right now, you're getting 4.9 turnovers per game out of Matthew Lee. That is a top 5 mark to the negative in all of college basketball. Also Mason, 3.7 turnovers per game, and they're the only duo in all of college basketball that consistently plays that is averaging north of 8.5 turnovers per game. So that's been a little bit unsightly, though. I do like the versatility that you have with Donovan Clay. 14 points, 7 boards. He stands right around 6'8", gives you 3 assists per game, and he's been shooting 36% from 3. And for Alston Mason, he's currently shooting 47% from the outside. I think that should be dying down just a little bit. And then for Middle Tennessee, they don't necessarily have a ton down low, but they do have Jared Coleman-Jones, who's done a nice job logging about 7 rebounds per game. With them missing Weston for much of the season, it's really been up to Elias King to carry the team from a scoring perspective. It's a Middle Tennessee bunch that's only shooting about 27% from 3-point range, but the King has been able to give you about 11.5 points, 4.5 boards per contest, and Justin Porter has stepped up with about 10.5 points per game himself. They have yet to find that true facilitator. Weston is the only guy that has been able to give you multiple assists per game, so that has caused this offense to be a little bit rudderless. And for Middle Tennessee, they did lose a lot of the guys that do generate turnovers from a season ago, but they're still doing a functional job on that front as well. And we have been noticing a little bit more recently out of Jacob Johnson as well. Jacob Johnson is someone that comes in from UMKC along with Long Island, and when I was at Long Island last season, he was a double-figure scorer. He's now shooting 50% from 3. Now, granted, I think that he's only taken like 2 threes as far as the season, but he's been able to give you about 8 points, 4 boards per contest. I think that there's a little bit of upside there, and with a Missouri State team that's not necessarily dominant down low, NJ Benson, he's been able to give you about 8 rebounds per game, a lot of them on the offensive side of things, but with that, I do think that Middle Tennessee is going to be able to bear down on defense. Their defense in general has been very much on point in regulation, giving up 70 points or fewer in 5 out of their last 6 games. Meanwhile, you've got a Missouri State team that is a little bit out of sorts, having given up 74 plus in each out of their last 3 games. I do think that Middle Tennessee is going to get this game played a little bit more at their standard, going up against a Missouri State bunch that that is very used to having some doldrums on offense. So it is a spot where I did set Middle Tennessee as a 2-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them as the money line underdog, and I did set my total at 128, so you're more around to 130. Going to be diving in on the under. 621, 622 on the betting board. Georgia plays host to Georgia Tech. Battle of Georgia sees the Bulldogs as between a 4 and a 5-point favorite. Your total on this game, it is anywhere between 145 and a half, and seeing a straight 146 out there as well. Did set my total at 146 half. I am going to be willing to take the 145 and a half over with Georgia. It's been hot and cold for the team all season long, and with Georgia, they have been having a bit of a tough time on the glass, but I do think that Russell Chewa is going to be able to have a good time down low with his right around 6 or so rebounds per game at 7 feet tall. You just really don't have anyone for Georgia Tech that matches up too great with them. You're bringing Tashawn Claude, who was over at Western Carolina a season ago. He's been able to log for the team about 6 rebounds per game, but at 6'7", I think that he's just going to get out physicaled and really just out-athleted in this one. You've got Miles Kelly, who's been a very nice scorer for Georgia Tech, and he's been their do-it-all player. 19 points, right around 6.5 boards. It's just that go-to scorer that they need, but you're going to need a little bit more three-point shooting, as this bunch is only shooting about 30% from the outside. You have had Dallin Coleman be able to shoot about 40% from the outside. He's been able to come up with some big games, like the 24 points that he had against UMass Lowell, but since that game and his last 3 games played, has had a combined 11 points, so he has been all over the place, and it is a Georgia team that's been a little bit all over the place with their offense as well, but you got a pair of guys in Noah Thomason along with Jabir Abdul-Rahim who've been able to combine for about 25.5 points per game. Abdul-Rahim is shooting north of 42% from the outside, and the freshman in one Silas Demery Jr. has been able to come up with some nice performances. A combined 28 points, 13 rebounds in the last 2 games. That's very much what Georgia needed because they've got a lot of options. Jaden Deloach comes in from VCU. He's been able to give you a few rebounds. Justin Hill, the transfer from the Big South, gives you a few assists, and then RJ Melendez at 6'9", he just sort of gives you a few rebounds, like 8 or 9 points per game. But I do think that with Kyle Servin not really taking strides forward with Georgia Tech, and in general, Georgia Tech perhaps being in a little bit of a letdown spot after big wins against Duke and Mississippi State, I do think that this is a nice opportunity for Georgia to be able to get it done. I did set the Bulldogs as a 4.5-point favorite. I think that they win from within, so going to be willing to lay up to 4 with Georgia, mostly seeing 4 out there, as a matter of fact, and did set my total at a 146.5. I do think that Georgia Tech kicks it up just a little bit with their 3-point shooting, and you've got a pair of more mid-tempo teams in this one that I think could play a game close enough for late game filling. So going to be taking a look at the over, and I'm going to be willing to go with Georgia, made them a 4.5-point favorite. 623, 624 on the betting board. It is Louisiana Tech, and they're on the road facing off against old Stone Cold Steve F. Austin. Steve F. Austin opens up a 2.5-point favorite. They're now between a 3.5 to a 4-point favorite, and your total setting between 138.5 and 140. Wholeheartedly agree with this line movement. I did set Stephen F. Austin as a 5.5-point favorite. I am going to be willing to lay the number. I do think that for Louisiana Tech, they're just going to have such a tough time with a Stephen F. Austin team that, no doubt about it, they're going to give away the ball quite a bit with their 19 turnovers per game, but they're one of the best teams in the country at generating turnovers as well, and it just makes for a just wacky, break 'em out, scrambled up game. And for Louisiana Tech, they've been able to do a solid job of taking care of the ball thus far this season with about 11.5 turnovers per game. But I do think that this is going to be a big time test for their young point guard and Sean Newman Jr., who's a sophomore that is spending his first year at really the Division I level. He's been able to give you about 5 assists and 2 turnovers per game, but really doesn't score a lot. You've got for Louisiana Tech, certainly the best player down low in this game is Daniel Pacho, 13 points, 10.5 rebounds per game, but you do have to wonder how he's going to respond in a game where things are just going to be all over the place and scatterbrained against a Stephen F. Austin team in which they just have so many different scoring options. You don't have anyone that's really giving you north of 9 points per game other than Day-Day Hall. He's been able to log about 11 points, 5 rebounds per game, but you just take a look at the entire whole of this team. You've got 8 different guys give you at least 6.6 points per game. You don't have a single guy that gives you north of 5.1 rebounds per game, but you've got everyone generating a few steals. You've got a team that, in general, everyone on the floor is able to shoot it from 3, and they shoot as a collective about 37.8% from 3-point range. It's just so much versatility, and it really is just a stylistic play with Stephen F. Austin. We've already seen them pick apart a team like Drake, being able to take them down by 24 points. We have seen them lose to Utah State by 30 points as well, so it's a high variance style of game, and for Louisiana Tech, they're going to be looking to hold their head on defense as well. It's a bunch that has allowed now 65 points for fewer in 4 of their last 5 games, with the lone exception being against one of the best offenses in all of college basketball in New Mexico. So it does make things very interesting in terms of this one, but we have seen Stephen F. Austin be able to get their tempo in a lot of games, just be able to make things all out of sorts. I do think that Isaiah Crawford and his 15 points per game going to be critical for Louisiana Tech, and I do think that they're going to be more efficient than a lot of Stephen F. Austin's opponents, but I do think that old Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin is going to be able to take it to Louisiana Tech in this one, get them out of their game, and that'll allow them to be able to get it done on the spread. I did set Stephen F. Austin as a 5.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and I did make this total a 143.5, so we're going to be taking a look at the over to go along with old Stephen F. Austin. 625, 626 on the betting board. It is Northern Illinois, and they play us at Indiana State. The Sycamores find themselves as 5.5 to 6.5 point road favorites, and your total is between 164.5 and 165.5. Set my total at a 163. I'm going to be willing to go in on the under. Indiana State has been very awesome with their offense, by the way. My goodness. This team was good with their offense last year. They're very good this year. Josh Schertz, who came up from the Division II level a few seasons ago, has really been able to do a nice job of implementing what made him so successful at that Division II level. But I will say this, with Indiana State, I do expect their defense to be able to kick it up a little bit as well. They are giving up 4.4 points more per 100 possessions thus far this season than they did a season ago. They go up against a Northern Illinois team that they themselves are not necessarily placing defense as a priority, 314th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but things in general are going to be a little bit more calmed down in this game. You do have a backcourt of Northern Illinois that I think is going to be able to help them hold in there as well. I did set them as a 5-point underdog, so anything north of 5, I am going to be willing to take the points, as you got David Coit, who's done a really nice job pumping in there about 18 points per contest, has been over the last 2 years a high 30s3-point shooter. Now, you're going to have a lot of versatility to match up with in this Indiana State team, as you got essentially a point forward in Robbie Avila that's saying 6'10", 17 points, 6.5 boards, 4 assists, shooting 40% from 3-point shooters. Just nobody on Northern Illinois that's able to match up with that. But I will say, you've been able to have the duo of Zariq Nutter along with Xavier Amos be able to combine for about 11 rebounds, 29 points per game. But both of these guys are shooting 50% from 3. Again, I think we should see a little bit of a fall off there, but you've also gotten a little bit more down low out of Yannick Conan Niederhauser, who comes over from Switzerland at 6'11". He's been able to log about 6 rebounds per game. It's a Northern Illinois team that they have a few featured guys, including Paul Geberwitt, who comes over from DePaul. He's been able to log about 11.5 points, 2.5 assists per game, but they do have a lot of depth, much like Indiana State, with someone like Xavier Bledson, who just is a nice floor general out there in general, 7.5 points, 4 assists, shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point range, and I'm just going to call what it is with Indiana State. They're currently shooting 41.5% from 3-point range. I think this should taper off a little bit. I think that they're a very good shooting team. I don't think they're quite this good of a shooting team, so I do think that we're going to see a little bit of coolage here from both of these teams, which is why I do like the under, and that's why you have seen this opener come from about a 168 down to about 164.5 to 165.5, but being able to get north of 5, going to be taking a look at the points with Northern Illinois to go along with that under. 627, 628 on the main board. Ole Miss plays us from Mount St. Mary's. The Mount finds themselves as between 14 and 14.5 point underdogs, with your total between 132.5 and 133.5, and with the Mount, I did set them as a underdog of 16 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay it with Ole Miss. Had to upgrade Ole Miss a little bit because now they do have Moussa Cisse, that 2-time transfer, back in the fold. He really made his debut last week, and I think that he is going to be an absolute game wrecker, as he really doesn't give you a whole heck of a lot on the offensive side of things, but year in and year out, he'll give you 8+ rebounds per game, and he pairs very well with a primary shot blocker in Jamarian Sharp, who's been able to give you about 2.5 blocks per contest for Cisse in his debut game. He had 5 rebounds in 15 minutes, so expect a little bit more from him in this one. And for Ole Miss, this is a team I think is going to take a little bit of a downfall with their 3-point shooting. As collective, they're shooting 36.5% from the outside, with Alan Flanagan shooting an amazing 45.5% from 3, and TJ Caldwell shooting 47.5% from the outside. Caldwell giving you about 9 points, 4 boards. Last year he shot 28% from 3, so see a little bit of fall off there, though. Alan Flanagan, I always liked him at Auburn. I think that he's better than the 10 points and 5 boards that he had a season ago at Auburn. I don't think he's quite up to snuff for 19 points, 7.5 boards, 2.5 assists, and 1.3 blocks per game, but love what these guys are bringing to the table. If you had a Mount St. Mary's team that in the past, they used to have guys like a Malik Jefferson that would do an absolutely amazing job down low. When they made the NCAA tournament, someone like Nana Akpu was really good for them. now all these guys are gone, and they've got one guy that's able to give you north of 5.5 rebounds per game, and Jetty Cordelia, who's been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game. But for the Mound as well, they lose their primary ball handler in Jalen Benjamin, and this is a team that plays at a slow tempo that's turning it over 15.5 times per game. They're shooting about 30.5% from three-point range. As Dakota Few, who played off the ball last season and shot 38% from 3 with 13 points per game. He's now the main ball handler, turning the ball over 3 times per game, still giving you 17.5 points per game, but his three-point shooting, because he's in a higher usage role, it has gone down to more like 32%, and just feels like Mount St. Mary's is all out of sorts on the offensive side of things. I think that Ole Miss, now that they get Cisse back in the fold, they are one of the more dominant defensive teams in all of college basketball. I will say this, I do think that Ole Miss is still going to be able to do a nice job of executing on defense, as well as it is a Mount team that they have cranked up their tempo a little bit more this year, and for the Mount, it is a bunch that has been able to score a little bit more recently, and they have given up 68 plus points in 4 of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, you've got an Ole Miss team that's gotten to 70 in each of their last 5. So I did set my total at a 134, which was the opener. Now it's come down to 132.5, 133.5. Looking at the overhand with Ole Miss, one to lay up to 15.5 with them. 629 and 630 on the betting board. It is Kansas, and they play OC UMKC, and UMKC finds themselves as 26.5 to 27.5 point underdogs. Totals between 142 and 142.5, and I made my line 30.5. I'm going to be one to lay it. I am not very bullish on the job that our good friend Marvin Menzies is doing over at UMKC. I've always thought that he's been a little bit of a brutal coach, and for UMKC, I just have no idea why they're trying to have Anderson Kopp, a 6'6", little bit of a wing, try to be Mr. Do-It-All for the team. He played just 4 games last year due to injury. He's always been a good off-the-ball three-point shooter. He's now giving you about 20% three-point shooting with 12.5 points, 4.5 boards, and 3 assists per game. I have no idea where they have put Allen, David, and Beckett Jr. as well, as he was logging about 7.5 rebounds per game. He's now been limited to 15.5 minutes with 8 points, 4 boards. That leaves you with a UMKC team that has one guy logging north of 5 rebounds per game. That'd be Jamar Brown, who comes in from the non-D1 level, and he's been solid. 14 points, 5.5 boards, shooting 38% from 3-point range, but it's just a rudderless, confusing, and sad UMKC team that shoots less than 60% at the free throw line. For UMKC, typically this is a team that they like to make games all grimy. They like to just be able to hold the games with that regard. Currently, UMKC 315th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, while you've got a Kansas team that certainly has had their warts. They're a top 45 team in terms of their defense, and this UMKC bunch just stands no chance against Hunter Dickinson, who's logging 21 points, 12.5 boards. He's currently shooting 64% from 3. Certainly that'll take a little bit of a fall off, and Kansas as a whole, they do need to cut down on the 13 turnovers per game, but it's not like UMKC is doing an amazing job of being able to generate a lot of turnovers. I know that KJ Adams has been dealing with a lot, but he has been tremendous for this bunch as well, chipping in there right around 2.5 assists per game. And Kevin McCullough, 18 points, 7 boards, 5 assists. The one thing I would like to see is Dwan Ayers become a little bit more of a scorer. You don't need him to put up like 15 plus, but he's giving out 7.3 assists while logging 5.6 points per game. I think this team is so much better when he's scoring more like 8 to 10 points, but all in all, I do think that for UMKC, they're just going to get fed to the wolves in this one. It's a UMKC bunch that scored 64 points for fear in 3 of their last 5 games, and for Kansas, I mean, they've really allowed north of 70 points just twice this far this season. I do think that they're going to be able to really lock it down on defense against the UMKC bunch that they're rudderless with their offense, they're rudderless with their defense. I did set my total at a 140.5, so diving in on the under, and with Kansas, one to lay up to 30 with them. 631, 632 on the betting board. It is Cornell, and they are going to be on the road facing off against Syracuse. Syracuse finds themselves as a 3 to a 3.5 point favorite, and your total is between 164.5 and 165.5. This is a total I set at a 160.5, so I'm going to be willing to go in on the under. You've got a Syracuse squad that is still trying to find their way a little bit on offense, and they have been incredibly inconsistent because when you've got Judah Mintz cooking, you've got him cooking, and when you get nothing from Judah Mintz, you get nothing from him, because in the last 5 games for Judah Mintz, he has scored 15, 22, 4, 33, and 5 points. So you don't know what you're going to get night in and night out of him. He's been able to shoot about 39% from 3, doling out 4 assists per game, but is giving you the 2.5 turnovers per game as well. We did see in the team's most recent game, J.J. Starlin be able to step up a little bit more with his 3-point shooting, as he entered into that game shooting 6% from the outside. He's now shooting 14.5% from 3. When it's all said and done, he'll probably be like a high 20s, low 30s 3-point shooter, so I expect a little bit more positivity moving forward. He impacts the game in quite a few ways. 3.5 assists, 5 boards, 12 points per game, but you can tell that he's a little little bit raw with Syracuse. They are going now to a little bit more of a man-to-man defense, which should help them out against teams like Cornell that they just take a whole gob ton of threes. And this is a Cornell team that I always love using this phrase, and it's so true with them. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. You've got a top scorer in Sean Hansen that gives you 12.5 points per game, but you just take a look up and down at this team. You've got 6 different guys that give you at least 8.9 points per game. You've got 8 different guys that give you at least 5.8 points per contest. You've only got one guy that logs north of 4.6 rebounds per game. That would be Guy Ragland Jr., but you got pretty much all these top scorers giving you at least 3.5 rebounds per game as well. Cornell is collected. They shoot 51% from the floor. The one thing that they need to prevent is the fact that they do turn the ball over about 15.5 times per game, and that is a little bit of a fear. I do think that this is a game that on both sides, you could see it get a little bit sloppy, and for Cornell, they've been a little bit better with their defense recently. 71 points for fear surrendered in 3 of their last 5 games. You've got a Syracuse team that has been very much all over the place in terms of their offense, as the squad has scored 62 points or fewer in 3 out of their last 5 games. So I do think that it's going to be a rather up-tempo and a little bit of a rambunctious game, but I think that this total has gone just a little bit too high, especially with Syracuse changing over the defense. I did set my total at a 160.5, so diving in on the under end with Syracuse. I do think that they're going to be able to do a relatively solid job down the line, like what Charlie Bell has been able to bring to the table. You've got someone in Benny Williams who's been a little bit in and out of the fold, but he's got good athleticism that I think matches up well in this spot. I do think that Syracuse no longer playing the zone helps them out against Cornell and gets them to a win on their home floor. I set Syracuse as a 4.5 point favorite, willing to lay the 3 to 3.5, and diving in on the under. 633, 634 on the betting board. Weber State hits the road face-off against Utah Valley. Utah Valley is an underdog of a point to a pick'em line as well in some spots. 125.5 to 126.5 is your total, and with Weber State made them the 2-point favorite. So getting them as a pick'em / a 1-point favorite, I'm going to be willing to ride there. Just so many moving parts for this Utah Valley team. With Utah Valley, they are relying upon some guys that in general I feel like they aren't necessarily great backcourt options. Caleb Stone Carawell, I mean, he was an okay player over at Austin P. He's been able to come over, give you about 12.5 points per game, shooting 37% from 3, but we are main ball handlers right now are Drake Allen along Jaden McClanahan. These two guys have been able to combine for about 7 assists per game, but they've had a tough time taking care of the ball with a combined 13 turnovers per game out of this team, and you just have a lack of shooting. Other than Stone Carawell, among guys that are averaging north of 3 points per game, he is the only one that is shooting above 25.5% from 3. Now, we should see some positivity, especially with Drake Allen, who is season to go over at Southern Utah, was shooting about 35.5% from 3-point range, but that's rough, especially when you only have one player that's giving you north of 5 rebounds per game. And that one player, Trevin Doris, he was a starter over at Utah State. He's a true 7-footer, so I think that he's going to do a nice job of locking it down on defense, but I do think that for Weber State, they are going to exploit this with the best player out there on the floor. That would be Dylan Jones. Dylan Jones has been amazing. 22 points, 11.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists per game, and because Weber State does play primarily through Jones, it does cause them to be a little bit more of a slow team. But for Weber State, even though they do play slow, they are very effective. They are, despite being like a bottom 30 team in terms of total possessions per game, logging north of 75 points per contest. They shoot as a collective 82.5% the free throw line, with just 9.5 turnovers per game. They're not great or terrible from 3-point range at about 33%. They just execute, and even though Weber State is playing slow, I do like this total over at a 132 because of that execution. You've also been able to get a little bit out of Stephen Verplanken Jr., who for Weber State last season shot 40% from 3 with about 12.5 points per game, duplicating those 12.5 points per game, been shooting more in the low 30s from 3-point range, but Jones has a little bit of help in the backcourt with Blaze Threat being able to give you about 3.3 assists per contest, and I do think that for this Utah Valley team, they are going to continue to see a little bit of a rise up with their offense. They've been able to break the 70-point plateau in 2 out of their last 3 games. Certainly have a Weber State team that has been locking it down on the defensive side of things. 65 points or fewer surrendered in each of their last 5 games, but I think that they've been the beneficiaries of some cold shooting in general. So I do think that things crank up a little bit more, and I do think that Weber State executes enough to be able to get it done in a game that probably will involve a little bit of late game fouling. I think it's going to be that close. So I did set my line at Weber State being a 2-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them as a pick'em / a slight favorite, and going to be taking a look at the over. 635, 636 on the betting board. It is Loyola Chicago. They hit the road face off against Tulsa. Tulsa finds themselves as a 1 to a 1.5 point underdog. Seeing some pickup lines out there as well. Your total is between 141.5 and 142.5. I did set Tulsa as a 1.5 point favorite. I don't know, maybe I'm just out on this loyal Chicago team, but I'm certainly going to be one to ride with Tulsa on the money line / as a pick'em with Tulsa. They completely overhauled that team that was so bad against the spread a season ago. They covered 4 spreads the entirety of last season, and I'm pretty sure they've already covered 4 spreads thus far this year. So, yay verily for that, but in terms of more of an on-court sort of look at Tulsa, this team has been able to bring in some talent. They bring in cast-offs like a PJ Hegarty, who was over at TCU, couldn't get out there on the floor. Isaiah Barnes, who was over at Michigan, couldn't get out there on the floor. They have been nice contributors, especially Hegarty, with 16.5 points, 5 boards, 3.5 assists. He's not necessarily been the world's greatest three-point shooter. Tulsa as a whole, they're only shooting about 29.5% from the outside end. Really, the hallmark for both of these teams, they need to cut down on the turnovers, as you've got a Tulsa bunch that is turning it over right around about 15 or so times per contest, and for loyal Chicago, they're not doing a whole heck of a lot better with about 13 turnovers per game, but they play at a little bit more of a slow tempo. You do have Braden Norris in the backcourt for loyal Chicago, who's been able to let it fly at about 38.5% from three-point range, and good news for this loyal Chicago team is that their top scorer from a season ago, Philip Olsen, he returned after missing the last 4 games against Harvard and made a big impact. 16 points, 7 boards. That does elevate this loyal Chicago team a little bit, but even when he is out there on the floor, they still do turn the ball over quite a bit. And for loyal Chicago, there's just no rebounding with this team. They've got one guy that's giving you north of 4.5 rebounds per game. That'd be the freshman Miles Rubin, who's been able to do a nice job with about 6 points, 5 boards, but you just need a little bit more there. It also should be able to win that battle down low with Jared Garcia, being able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game with this loyal Chicago bunch. The defense has been able to do a little bit more recently. 70 points of fear surrendered in 4 of their last 5 games, but they've went up against some lower tempo teams for one, and involved like Chicago State, New Orleans in that fold as well. And this is a Tulsa team that's looking to run it and gun it. They are one of the more up-tempo teams in all of college basketball. That is reflected in the fact that this team has gotten to at least 70 points in every single one of their games as far this season. And for Tulsa, they've given up at least 70 points in all but 2 of their games as far this season as well. I do think that things are going to be cranked up a little bit more. I do think that you're going to be seeing a lot of turnovers in general, but I do think that with Tulsa, bringing in Kobe Williams, Eric Conkle used to be the coach over at Louisiana Tech. He brought in a few guys from Louisiana Tech like Kobe Williams. That just gives his team a little bit more flow. They know exactly what to expect out of Conkle, and I think that elevates them to a win. I set Tulsa as a 1.5 point favorite. We'll take them as a pick'em / a slight money line underdog, and somebody told 147.5, so also look it over. 637, 638 on the betting board. It is Butler, and they play us at Buffalo. Buffalo is a 22.5 point underdog. Your total is between 150 and 151, and with Buffalo, I did set them as an underdog of 26.5 points. I'm going to be one to lay it with Butler. We've seen these big favorites be quite profitable, and I do fear that this might be the one time which Buffalo actually rises up and looks like that team that was being coached by Nate Oates way back in the day. But this Buffalo team is 1-7, and they just don't have anything in the backcourt. Anquan Bolden Jr. is honestly a relatively solid freshman that gives you 6.5 points, 1.6 steals per game. His shot is a little bit of a work in progress, but when you're having him as one of your main guards in the backcourt, you know that it's just not really going well for him. And I mean, the 81 on my Twitter /X feed is actually an ode to his father, Anquan Bolden. So I want to be as nice as I can be to this Buffalo team, but they just flat out stink. Cy Chapman has been able to do a nice job down low. 6.5 boards, 18 points per game, and then you have had Janavius Smith chip in there about 9.5 rebounds, 10.5 points per game. The front court is honestly not too bad for this Buffalo team, but 18 turnovers per game. They are towards the top of all of college basketball in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. They are 357th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage as well. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, this is a Buffalo team that is getting just absolutely cooked as well at 350th. You just don't have a lot going for this team, and recognize that Butler has not been the Mona Lisa Vito of defense, but you know what? They're 57th in the country. That'll fly. You've got Pierre Brooks, who comes in from Michigan State. He's been able to log about 17 points per contest. It's a Butler team that shooting much better from 3-point range as well, shooting 35% from 3. You tell that Thad Matta just did not have his guys last year. He really went in the portal. He did quite a bit of an overhaul, and it's worked out very well. And Posh Alexander, just him being away from Andre Curbelo is big. Andre Curbelo is like a big rusty anchor to any other guard in the backcourt, and you can see that with Posh Alexander last year. Now he's playing free. He's able to cook once again. 5.3 assists, 1.8 steals, and 2.4 turnovers per game. He's never been a great 3-point shooter, but you've got Jamal Telford, DJ Davis combined for 28.5 points, shooting between the two of them north of 90%, the free throw line, 35.5% from 3. I think that Buffalo just gets destroyed in the backcourt. I actually don't hate dominate their front court, but with this Buffalo bunch, it's been a struggle for them to be able to get to 70 points as far this season, as against D1 foes, they have done so only once, and got a Butler team has been able to do a relatively solid job on defense as well. So it is a spot in which I'm willing to lay up to 26 points with Butler. I did set my total at a 146.5, so it is an ordeal where I'm going to be taking a look at the under, as I just don't think that Buffalo does their part on defense, and want to lay it with Butler. 639, 640 on the betting board. Boise State plays us in North Texas. North Texas is a 4.5 to a 5-point underdog, and your total is between 123.5 and 124, and I think that this is a pretty appropriate total. I set mine at a 122. I'm looking at the under. North Texas, they lose Grant McCaslin as their coach, but they keep the super duper slow, grimy style, and I think that helps them hold in there. I set my line at 4. It's really hard to win by margin when you've got this much of a slog on tap, and for Boise State, they're coming off of a nice triumph over the weekend as they went in and they got a nice win over St. Mary's by kind of 63-60. But for this Boise State team, they have now scored 65 points or fewer in each of their last 3 games. You got a North Texas team that is just taking you to the dentist right now. For North Texas, they have allowed 66 points or fewer in all but one of their games thus far this season, and the lone exception was the game that went to overtime against Northern Iowa. They had given up 68 points in regulation. So in regulation, they have yet to allow an opponent to exceed 68 points. You've got a North Texas bunch that has a nice backcourt duo, and Aaron Scott, coupled with Jason Edwards, are combined for about 28 points per contest. And Scott, great Scott, he is shooting about 46% from three-point range. In North Texas, they should see a fall off from their 39% three-point shooting. This is a very good shooting team, been able to get 44% shooting from the outside out of Reuben Jones, but he's more of a career about 36% three-point shooter. I think we're going to see a little bit of a tapering off there, but for North Texas, with them playing so slowly, them getting 7 steals per game is also very big. John Buggs III, who comes in from the old UTSA Roadrunners, has been able to help out with that. Now for Boise State, I do think that the most versatile player out there on the floor is Tyson Dagenhart. He had 6'8", 6'9", is able to pop some threes, give you 13.5 points, 5 boards, a steal, perhaps a block per game as well. But I just feel like Omar Stanley, even though his numbers are fine, 10.5 points per game, he just doesn't feel like the world's greatest fit with this Boise State team. Maybe it's just me, but we've noticed that he's been playing limited minutes. They've had him as a little bit more of a specialist. He picks up a lot of fouls, so that's been a little bit clunky, and you just don't have a main facilitator for Boise State. They've only turned the ball over about 11.5 times per game, but last year Marcus Shaver Jr. was their go-to guy that allowed Chibuza Egbo to really shoot north of 40% from the outside off the ball. He needs to have the ball in his hands a little bit more because there isn't that creator for the team right now. The only guy that's giving you north of 2 assists per game is 6'9" Cam Martin, so it is an ordeal where I did set my total at 122. I think that you get a slow, grimy game involving two teams that really pride themselves on defense, and with Boise State, going to set them as a 4-point favorite with that lack of point guard. So taking the points from North Texas, and I'm going to be diving in on the under. 641, 642 on the betting board. It is Oklahoma State. They have the red face-off against Southern Illinois. Southern Illinois is between a pick-em to a 1.5-point underdog, and your total on this game is between 132 to 132.5. I feel like Southern Illinois is a better team here. I set them as a 3-point favorite, so I'm going to be one ride with them as a pick-em / a very, very slight underdog. You got an Oklahoma State bunch that just hasn't really been able to find their way on offense as far this season. You've been having Bryce Thompson over the last few years be really that go-to scorer for this bunch, but he's been dealing with some injuries this far this season. He's missed 3 games already, and he was shooting 50% from 3 when he went down with an injury. I will say, Javon Small's come up big, coming in from East Carolina. 15.5 points, 5 boards, 5 assists. He's doing exactly what he did over at ECU a season ago. Can be a little bit inconsistent with the scoring, but he's always going to impact the game. For Oklahoma State as a whole, they're shooting a little bit better from 3 at 34.5% from the outside, but they're just not getting the shots inside that they did a season ago when they did have more of those guys like Moussa Cisse. Now your top rebounder has been Eric Daly Jr. He's been able to give you about 6.5 or so rebounds per game, but you tell that they're just missing some of that pop inside, and now they go up against the Southern Illinois team that they are a little bit top heavy. Xavier Johnson has been Mr. Do-It-All with 23 points, 5 assists, shooting 45% from 3-point range, but Clarence Rupert does a good job down low. He's part of that St. Peter's team that made the Elite 8. He's been able to give you about 7 boards per contest. You've got a Southern Illinois team that does a good job protecting the ball at about 11 turnovers per game. Now, what I will say about Southern Illinois is that they are shooting north of 40% from 3-point range. That should be taking a little bit of a drop off, and you've got a pair of teams that they always look to make things all yucky with Oklahoma State State, 96th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Southern Illinois, they're 97th. They're right on par with one another, but I do trust in Xavier Johnson to really be the best scorer out there on the floor. And with this Oklahoma State perimeter defense, I do have a few question marks with it, with them being 231st in the country. So I do think that this is a stylistic, little bit of a rough matchup for Oklahoma State, which is why I do lean to the home Southern Illinois Salukis in this spot. Set them as a 3-point favorite. I think that you get a slowed down, just rough game for scoring. Set my total at 131. So diving in on the under, and we'll take Southern Illinois on this relatively pick-em line. 643, 644 from Madison Square Garden. It is UConn and North Carolina. North Carolina setting between a 5 to a 6-point underdog with your total between 153 and 154. And with UConn, I did make them the favorite of 5 points. Getting 5.5 to 6, that is going to be my buy point on North Carolina. Now you've got an incredible impact guy down low in Donovan Clingan, but as we know with Donovan Clingan, the one knock that you have on him is that he's not going to give you like 30 plus minutes per game, whereas Armando Bacot, who's giving you 11 plus rebounds, 15 plus points per game, he is going to be able to do so. And with this UConn team, certainly you've got a little bit more versatility, as I absolutely love what Tristan Newton is able to bring to the table. With Tristan Newton, last year, he was able to take some strides forward during the NCAA tournament, and he has just allowed that to manifest this season. He's leading the team in nearly every offensive category. 17.5 points, 7.5 boards, 6.5 assists. He's shooting about 37.5% from three-point range. Had a triple-double against Manhattan a little bit earlier in the year. He had 31 points in that game against Kansas as well. But you tell that with UConn, they still are dealing with a few moving parts in the backcourt. Integrating Cam Spencer has been able to do a nice job of clicking thus far. And I do think that some of UConn's numbers were built up due to the fact that they were playing Mississippi Valley State. They were playing like Northern Arizona to begin the season. Meanwhile, North Carolina in that battle for Atlantis, they did play against some good competition, which does make this team a little bit more battle-tested. You've got Cormac Ryan, who I don't think is necessarily the world's greatest fit with this offense, but Harrison Ingram is 14.5 points at 6'8". He's able to dole out the ball a little bit, shooting north of 40% from three-point range. And then RJ Davis, just being out of the shadow of Caleb Love, I think has been very beneficial for him. He's been able to shoot about 35% from three with 20 points per contest. Would like to see a little bit more depth with this team, but we have been seeing a little bit more this year out of some of these guys like a Jalen Washington. We've been seeing about 15 or so minutes per game as well out of Seth Trimble, who's been able to give you about 5.5 points per contest, currently shooting 60% from three-point range, but he's been able to give you 25 points in the last 3 games. I like the way that he's been able to step up, and I do think that that's going to keep North Carolina lively against a UConn team that they do it on both offense and defense. And for North Carolina, this team is never going to be mistaken for some sort of an amazing defense or anything like that, but it's been a little bit better this year. North Carolina more around 80th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Shooter's eye typically a little bit wonky in MSG, so I did set my total at 147, diving in on the under. And with UConn, set them as 5-point favorites, so 5.5 or more, taking the points with North Carolina to go along with the under. 645, 646 on the betting board. Utah plays this to Southern Utah. Southern Utah is a 21.5 to a 22-point underdog with your total between 154.5 and 156. I did set my total at 146, so I'm going to be going in on the under. Got a Utah team that is very much a mid-tempo team thus far this season, and for Southern Utah, they do have the coaching regime change over to Rob Jeter. Rob Jeter throughout his career has been a little bit more of an up-tempo coach, but it's not like he's playing at some sort of warp speed either, so I do feel like this has been set a little bit too high, and I do think that Utah is going to be in full control on the glass, as you've got Brandon Carlson, who's been just so tremendous this season. A true 7-footer that's able to shoot 37% from three, 17 points, a block, 6.5 rebounds per game, and you just get that all across from this Utah bunch, as right now you've got 3 separate guys giving you at least 3 rebounds per game. 5 out of your top 6 scorers have been able to give you at least 4.5 rebounds per game. You've been able to get a little bit of versatility as well out of Lawson Lovering. He's a gentleman that comes over from Colorado as a starter for them last season, and he's shown a little bit of 3-point range as well. Utah just so much size going up against the Southern Utah bunch. They don't have a single guy that's giving you north of 5 rebounds per game. Zion Young, 6'4", 6'5" combo player that played with Rob Jeter back when they were both at Western Illinois. He's been able to come in. He's been able to give the team 14.5 points per game, shooting 37% from 3-point range, but you just need a little bit more than that, as the team is having to play a lot of positionless basketball. You haven't gotten about 4.5 rebounds out of Parasa Falah in the backcourt as well. You've been able to have a pair of guys be able to combine for about 24 points or so, as Brandon Housley has been able to chip in there about 11.5 points per contest. You get more like 12.5 points per game out of Prophet Johnson, who's come up from the non-Division I ranks as well. And for Southern Utah, they don't do a bad job of taking care of the ball. It's a Utah team that has been a little bit better at being able to generate steals. That's not necessarily their specialty, though, but I did take a look at this Utah team. They've been slowing down their tempo. It was built up a little bit after they played like St. John's, Wake Forest, towards the beginning part of the season, and they're going up against the Southern Utah team that has really been struggling on the offensive side of things. 66 points or fewer in 3 out of their last 4 games, so I do think that this is going to be some Utah domination. They just completely plow on the glass, so I did set my total at a 146. I just don't think that Southern Utah going to be able to hold up their end of the bargain with regards to this total, so going to be taking a look at the under, and with Utah, 1 to lay up to 20 with them. I think we've gotten a little bit out of sorts. I do think that Southern Utah makes just enough shots in the backcourt to be able to stay lively. I think we've gotten a little bit out of whack with the numbers. So, going to be willing to take 21.5 to 22 with Southern Utah and taking a look at the under. 647, 648 on the betting board. Michigan is going to be playing us Indiana. Indiana is between a 5.5 to a 6-point underdog, and your total is 146. And with Michigan, I did set them as a favorite of 6 points. It's opened up at 4.5 at the 5.5 that I'm seeing right now. That'd be the max I'd be willing to lay, but I am going to be willing to lay it. I just don't really like the rotations for Indiana as of right now. It feels like they've got some misfit toys that are trying to play together right now, and it's just not going so well. Khalil Ware has been really good, by the way. 17.5 points, 9.5 boards, a former top 20 recruit that is really showing why he was that, but Mackenzie Mbakbo has really not found his rhythm with this offense, and there's just a bunch of tall, clunky guys in general. I think that the better fits for the team right now are some of these guys, like an Anthony Walker, who comes in from Miami, a Peyton Sparks, who comes in from Ball State, while Malik Reneau has good numbers, 14.5 points, 4.5 boards. He just doesn't feel like he plays very well with Khalil Ware. You've got a backcourt including Trey Galloway along Xavier Johnson, who have been able to combine for about 20 points per contest, and to the credit of Johnson, he's cut down on the turnovers of Trey Galloway last season. Shot about 45% from 3. He's down to 16% this season, and Indiana should see an uptick in their three-point shooting, as they're currently shooting 25% from three-point range, but that has been rough, and for Michigan, they certainly have their defensive wards, as we have seen that on display the last few weeks. But you've got Olivier Combo, who's able to give you 17 points, 7 boards, 6'9" combo player that's shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range. For a Michigan team that as a whole, they shoot 38% from three-point range. I think that they're going to lose a battle down low, but not as much as a lot of people would think. You've got someone like a Terrace Reed, who's able to give you 6.5 rebounds per game. I like what he's able to do inside. You've got Doug McDaniel, who's been very efficient with the ball, 5.5 assists to about 2.4 turnovers per game, shooting 40% from the outside. Now, with Michigan, I'd like to see them be a little bit better than 235th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but for Indiana, again, they don't have necessarily a lot of shooting, and they're 110th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. It's not like they've been doing anything amazing themselves, so it's a good old situation of something's got to give. This is a Michigan squad that they have been all gas, no brakes, and for Indiana, just been a really ugly team in general, so I did make Michigan a 6-point favorite here at a 5.5. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Neither of these teams necessarily play at warp speed, though I will say Michigan this year, they have bumped up that tempo a little bit more with Juwan Howard currently out of the fold and Phil Martelli in. He does have these guys playing a little bit faster, but I do think that Indiana going to be able to hold up a little bit more on defense. I just don't think that they hold up their end of the bargain on offense. So I'm going to be diving in on the under and willing to lay up to 5.5 with Michigan. 649, 650 on the betting board. It is Idaho playing against the Pacific. This is a pick'em game with Idaho also in some spots being a 1-point favorite. Your total on this game is anywhere between 142 and 143.5. I did set Idaho as a favorite of 4.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to take them as a pick'em / a very slight favorite. This is a Pacific squad that has just been all out of sorts. They go on the road and they knock off Cal a little bit earlier in the season, and then they have a turnaround in which they go to overtime on their home floor against Mississippi Valley State. That is the way that it has been going for the team thus far this season. And for Pacific, the biggest thing for them is that they have no stinking size whatsoever. They don't have a single guy that's giving you north of 5 rebounds per game. They're going with pretty much 5 guards out there on the floor. Your biggest guy that sees minutes is Burke Smith, and he's been a lazy big man with 2.9 rebounds per game. And quite honestly, you've got 2 guys on the roster with north of 3 rebounds per game. Judson Martindale, he's able to give you a little bit of versatility. He comes in from Holy Cross, 12 points, shoots about 34.5% from 3-point range, and you've been able to get some good facilitation out of Mo Odom. To the credit of him, not much of a scorer at about 7.5 points per game, but 5 assists, 2 turnovers per game. That's been relative relatively solid, but for Idaho, even though they don't necessarily have ideal size, Julian Mims should be able to win the battle down low. 7.5 boards, 10.5 points per game. Idaho is really leaving something to be desired in the backcourt. They shoot about 31.5% from three-point range. They lose guys like Isaac Jones from a season ago that were really able to be elevators, but Taryn Frank, someone who began his career at TCU along Vanderbilt, has been able to give you 9 points, 4 boards. I like the way that he's able to contribute in a wide variety of ways, and you've been able to get a little bit more out of Quinn Denker as well. He comes over from the non-Division I ranks. He's been able to log about 10 points, 2.5 assists per game at Idaho. They don't turn the ball over a ton, about 11.5 turnovers per game. They're a little bit more of a slower team that always stinks on defense. They're currently 308th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Pacific more in the neighborhood about 200th, so Pacific has a little bit of an edge there, but with Pacific having absolutely nothing down low, I do think that they are going to get exposed. I do think that that's going to lead to Idaho getting second and third chances, and I do think that both of these teams are going to be able to knock down some shots. This is a spot where I did set my total as a result at a 148.5. I'm going to be taking a look at the over, and in terms of this spread, I did set Idaho as a 4.5 point favorite, so we'll take Idaho as a pick'em slash a very, very slight favorite, and going to be taking a look at this total over. 651, 652 on the betting board. It is Baylor, and they play host to Seton Hall. Seton Hall is an underdog of 11 to 11.5 points, and your total on this game going to be finding it anywhere between 151, seeing size of 152.5. I did set my total at a 148. I'm going to be going in on the under. Baylor is right now your number one team in all of college basketball in terms of three-point shooting. They're shooting north of 44% from three-point range as a collective, and this is a really good Baylor shooting team. I think there's going to be a little bit of a fall off from there. What comes up must come down, but even with that, I did set Baylor as a favorite of 12 points, so I'm still going to be willing to lay the number despite the fact that I do think that that slight bit of a fall off is going to be coming, because I do think that this is a Seton Hall team that is very suspect down low. Elijah Hutchins Everett is someone that came over from Austin Peay that they were relying upon down low. He's been dealing with some injuries. It's really been all about what you've been able to get out of the Santa Clara transfer. And Jada Bediako has been solid, 10 points, right around 7.5 rebounds per game. And you still have Kadari Richmond, who just does it all in the backcourt. About 14.5 points, 6 boards, 4 assists, 2 steals per game. But last year shot around 40% from 3. That's down to 9.1% thus far this season. Trey Davis, Elamir Dawes are your main shooters, and they've been able to combine for about 26.5 points per game, but they're combined shooting the low 30s from three-point range themselves. And for Seton Hall, they just don't have the same defense as they've had last few seasons. I don't know if it's because Shaheem Holloway had like Casey Ondefu in the fold for like 500 billion years, but this is a Seton Hall team that's more around 60th in the country currently in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. It's a Baylor team that's actually 44th, despite the fact that they're so high-powered on offense. And we've seen Yves Missy, who's got a lot of versatility at right around 7 feet tall, be able to log about 6.5 rebounds per game. You've also had Josh Ojiwana be able to do a nice job being able to man it down low with about 5 boards. And then you've got in the backcourt Jacoby Walter, the freshman, and the super senior, and Ray J. Dennis doing a nice job playing in tandem. Dennis is your facilitator with 6.5 assists per game while shooting 42% from three-point range. The 3.5 turnovers is a little bit unsightly, but does a good job of feeding someone like a Walter, who's been your main scorer with about 15 points per game. Langston Love, Jalen Bridges, Jaden Nunn are all shooting at least 42.9% from 3, and they're all logging between 11.5 and 12.5 points per game. You've got a lot of depth with this Baylor team, and I just think that that's going to take it out of a Seton Hall bunch. They just don't have that explosiveness. It is a Seton Hall team that has been all over the place in terms of their overall production, and they have now given up north of 70 points, Seton Hall has, in 4 of their last 5 games. Again, I do see a fall-off coming for this Baylor team, a Baylor bunch that has been a bit better on defense recently as well, giving up 72 points or fewer in now 5 out of their last 6 games. So this is a spot where I'm going to be taking a look at the under. Set my total 148, but even with Baylor probably seeing a little bit of regression with their three-point shooting, I did set them as a favorite of 12 points. So willing to lay up to 11.5 with Baylor and taking a look at the under. 653, 654 on the betting board. Got San Diego State on the road against Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon is a underdog of 3 points, and your total is between 145 and 145.5. Set San Diego State as a 4.5 point favorite. I am going to be willing to lay this number with San Diego State. This defense is still quite solid, but they have been all over the place with their offense, and you've noticed they've really cranked up the tempo. This is a San Diego State team that is above average with regards to their tempo after they made the national title game last season, playing at that very slow and controlled pace. They've got one of the top scorers in all of college basketball in Jaden Ledee. He's a top 10 guy in terms of points per game with 22.6 points per contest, 10.5 boards, logging a double-double. He has been tremendous, but here's the question with San Diego State. are you going to be able to see Darian Trammell rise back up? He was a big reason why they made that national title game a season ago, and still has been able to dole out the ball. 3.6 assists to 1 turnover per game, but this guy really took some big shots when he was over at Seattle prior to coming to San Diego State in that title run as well. So that's my big question mark, but I do think that San Diego State going to be able to do a good job against the Grand Canyon team that it looks like they're trying to find their footing a little bit more as well. They made the NCAA tournament last season after they were unseasonably hot from three-point range. They have seen their three-point shooting fall off a little bit, and for this Grand Canyon team, they need to get back to basics with their defense. Prior to last year, this was always a team that was in the top 50 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they're back to that. Number 47 in the country. You've got some good team rebounding with Gabe McLaughlin headlining things with 10 points, 8 boards, capable of shooting some threes at about 30%. Big thing for Grand Canyon is cutting down on the 13.5 turnovers per game, and it does feel like it's taken a little bit of a fall off this offense has with Ty and Grant Foster just being Mr. Do-It-All. And he's got great numbers, 22.5 points, 6.5 boards, shooting 38% from three-point range, but everything runs through him. And Rayshawn Harrison last year was your top scorer. He's down to about 14.5 points per game, and we've really seen his offensive numbers suffer as a result. Now, down low, you've got Sidney Curry, the Louisville transfer, along with Duke Brennan, who have been able to combine for about 10.5 rebounds per game. That's going to be tough for San Diego State to match up with, but you've got Lamont Butler, who was the hero that hit that big shot that sent San Diego State to the title game season ago. He's done a good job of being able to dish it out with about 3.8 assists per game. I think that the overall versatility that you've got in this backcourt for San Diego State, all the guys that are able to handle the ball, is going to be able to propel them to a victory in this spot. So I did set San Diego State as a favorite of 4.5 points. So seeing this number at 3, I'm going to be willing to lay it. And in terms of this total, I set mine at a 142.5. I do think that both of these teams starting to shape up with their defense. I do think that San Diego State going to try to get back to their basics and try to play a little bit more slowly moving forward. So I'm going to be taking a look at the under, and I'm going to be taking a look at San Diego State willing to lay up to 4 with them. 655, 656 on the betting board. It is BYU, and they play us Evansville. The Purple Aces do find themselves as a underdog of 23 to 24 points, and total on this game going to be finding it at 152.5. I did set BYU as a favorite of 22.5 points, so seeing between 23.5 and 24, I think that we've gone a little bit too lofty. I am going to be willing to take the points. It's an Evansville team that has been able to do a good job down low with you assigned to me, be able to do a nice job being able to haul in there about 5 or so rebounds per game at 6'10". He's able to really make things lively down low. He's a good rim protector that gives you about 10 points per game, but how about what we've seen in the non-Division I transfer in Ben Himarichis? He has come in and given this team 18 points per contest. Now, for Evansville, they are going to have a daunting task going up against a BYU team that has been one of the top teams in all of college basketball and really every facet of basketball. BYU is 4th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're one of the hottest three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. And you got an Evansville team that has been much better on defense this year themselves. They're in the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And I do think that BYU inevitably is going to see a little bit of fall off from their three-point shooting. They currently have 3 of their top 4 scorers shooting at least 43.8% from three-point range. Noah Waterman, 11.6 boards at 6'10", shooting about 45.5% from 3. Jackson Robinson shooting 44% from the outside with 16.5 points per game. And Trevin Nell has been able to shoot about 44% from the outside as well. It's a BYU team that they do a good job just as a collective of being able to pull in their rebounds, as out of your top 6 scorers, 5 of them have been able to give you north of 4 rebounds per game. And you've also been able to get some good liveliness in the backcourt out of down Hall as well. Not necessarily as much of a scorer this year, but still shooting 43.5% from 3, 4 assists to 1.9 turnovers per game. That's going to be hard for Evansville to match up with, but Tanner Cuff has been very efficient with the ball as well. 3.5 assists to 0.6 turnovers per game. He's done a solid job of being able to pull in there some boards as well. 7+ rebounds in each out of the last 4 games. I like the way that Evansville has been able to rise up. Certainly, I do think that BYU is the better team in this spot, and for BYU, they've given up 56 points or fewer in 4 out of their last 5 games, so they certainly have been dominant on that side of things. And hey, for Evansville, how about the fact that they have scored at least 74 points in each out of their last 5 games? So it's an interesting blend in this one. I do think that the three-point shooting on both sides is still going to be quite hot. I did set my total at 152.5. This opened up at a 150, and I'm still seeing out there a straight 151.5. I would be willing to take that 151.5 over, especially if we can get back to the opening number. And in this ordeal, I did set my line at 22.5, so being able to get north of 23. Going to be taking the points to go along with that over. 657, 658 on the betting board. It is Kent State. They hit the road face-off against South Dakota State. The Jackrabbits do find themselves as favorites of 2 points and totals anywhere between 145 and 145.5. And I reverse it. I set Kent State as a 2-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them outright on the money line. It's a Kent State squad that really does a good job of being able to get up in you. Last season, they were one of the best teams in all of college basketball in terms of being able to force turnovers. We've seen a little bit of a drop-off there as Kent State not quite a top 20 team like they were a season ago in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, but they still do a really good job with their backcourt defense as overall it is a Kent State team that's more around 130th this season, and for the drop-off that you got in the backcourt, they've been able to buff things up a little bit down low with Chris Payton Jr., a transfer from Pittsburgh who's been able to log about 14.5 points, 7.5 boards, currently shooting 43% from three-point range as well. Love the impact that he's been making for this team. You've also got Giovanni Santiago, has been not quite what Sincere Carey was in the backcourt a season ago, but he's been able to do a nice job of being able to log about 7.5 points, 4.5 assists per game. He's more of an off-the-ball scorer, but he does have some help in the backcourt with Jalen Sullinger shooting about 38% from three-point range and Von Cameron Davis being able to log about 11 points. He's been shooting north of 40% from the outside as well. And then you take a look at what you're able to get out of the South Dakota State team, and it's all about Zeke Mayo. My goodness, 7 boards, 3.5 assists, 18.5 points per game, and you've got a lot of great shooters on this team. Charlie Easley, a career north of 40% three-point shooter, very easily, if I will. Luke Capel has been able to shoot about 50% from the outside with 13.5 points per game, and been able to get a little bit of rebounding out of William Kyle III as well. 11.5 points, 6 boards. I'm not saying he's quite like this, but if you remember what Douglas Wilson did a few seasons ago, he's like a light version of that. But with the South Dakota State team, it's all about taking care of the ball. They had their big issues towards the beginning part of last season with that. They've been much better this year with 11.5 turnovers per game, but I do think that Kent State going to be able to force some turnovers in a game where I think that Kent State gets back to their roots. They've been playing at a top 30 pace in terms of total possessions per game. I think that they're going to taper that back. Meanwhile, South Dakota State has been playing very slowly this year, and I think that they ramp that up a little bit. I think that you're in for a big-time nip-and-tuck game, and I do think that in the end, we are going to be seeing things go just barely over the total, and I do think that in the end, Kent State is able to get the job done. I do like Kent State outright on the money line. I set them as a 2-point favorite and did set my total at a 146, so diving in on the under to go along with Kent State. 659, 660 on the betting board. It is Idaho State, and they're on the road facing off against Fresno State. Fresno State, and we're between an 8.5 to a 9.5 point favorite. Your total is between 132 and 133. I said Fresno State as a 12.5 point favorite as well. This opened up at 7. I completely agree with the move, and even with the move, I still think that there's some value here. I am going to be willing to lay it with Fresno State. Fresno State has done a nice job of being able to elevate their three-point shooting that a season ago was one of the worst in all of college basketball. Not that it's amazing by any stretch of the imagination this year, but Xavier Dussel, who comes over from Wyoming, has been able to give you 9.5 points, shooting 37.5% from three. He's really been the main elevator for this team. You've got Donovan Yap also shooting 45.5% from the outside on 11.5 points per game. I think that that'll cool off a little bit, but you're able to couple that with winning the battle down low with Anak Boyke, who's been able to give you about 7 points, 8 boards per contest, and Eduardo Andre 3000, who's been able to give you 7 boards. He gives you a block per game. Really like what he's able to do down low. Going up against an Idaho State team that is currently in the bottom 20 in terms of total possessions per game. They don't do a bad job on the glass. You've got 3 of your top 4 scorers who are able to give you at least 5 rebounds per game, as your main 2 have been Brandon Parker along with Kyrie Huey. They've been able to combine for about 11.5 rebounds per game, and Parker has some size at right in the neighborhood of about 6'8". He's been able to throw it in there at a 41% clip from 3-point range, but with this Idaho State team, just because you play slow doesn't mean that you're necessarily the world's greatest defense, as they're currently 228th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And if you look at some of the teams that they have played, not so great. Their last 5 opponents were against a non-D1 school, the Citadel, Campbell, Lindenwood, and Pepperdine. Meanwhile, you've got a Fresno State team that is coming off of getting pounded, but they got pounded against BYU. They were able to have a nice triumph in overtime against New Mexico State prior to them losing to the likes of JMU, UC Santa Barbara. But for this Fresno State team, they've won out, they've challenged themselves. Idaho State, right now, they're playing very slowly against really bad competition. And I do think that this is going to be a slowed down game. Fresno State, they themselves have not been an up-tempo team last few seasons, but I think that Fresno State is able to win that battle down low. Fresno State, a much better three-point shooting team than they were a season ago. So it is a spot where I did set my line at a 12.5. I'm going to be willing to lay it, and I did set my total 128.5. I just don't think that Idaho State going to be able to get a lot going on offense. I do think that they're going to continue to try to run that slow, grimy style. So I'm going to be taking a look at the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Fresno State. 661, 662 on the betting board. It is Cleveland State on the road facing off against St. Mary's. And St. Mary's is a favorite of 14 to 14.5 points with a total between 133.5 and 135. And with Cleveland State, I did set them as an underdog of 13.5 points. So getting 14, I'm going to be willing to take these points. I also just don't understand where this total of 133.5 to 134.5 is coming from as well. You got a St. Mary's team that has been just ghastly in terms of their offense thus far this season. They're once again playing at one of the slowest styles in all of college basketball. And for Cleveland State, they certainly have bumped things up a little bit in terms of their tempo, but this is not some sort of team that's going to be looking to burn it up as well. They're 252nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game for Cleveland State. I do think that they can hang in there, though, because you got Tristan Iranura, who's able to do it all. 3 assists, 7 boards, 17 points per game. He's currently shooting 44.5% from 3, and that's a big thing with this as well. I think that Cleveland State is going to see a drop-off from their 36.5% three-point shooting. Drew Lauder has been able to shoot 37.5% from the outside, 13 points per game. This is largely the same core for Cleveland State from a season ago when they shot 31% from the outside. Now, I do think that there's a little bit of positivity to him for St. Mary's, shooting just 30% from three-point ranges. This is largely the same core from a season ago as well, but Adam Mahaney has really had to be the go-to scorer for the team. 15.5 points, shooting about 38% from three-point range. Nobody else gives you 9.3 points per game, though. You do have guys down low that are able to rebound. Mitchell Saxon, 9.5 points, 9 boards per contest. Joshua Jefferson, 9 points, 6 boards himself. You've got a St. Mary's team that isn't forcing as many turnovers as they did a season ago, but you do have Augustus Marcelinas, who's been able to take a little bit of the edge off of Mahaney in terms of facilitation, a steal and a half, 2.5 assists per contest. But for the St. Mary's team, they've just been out of sorts in terms of their offense. Defense has still been relatively solid. They did get gashed in that game against Utah. I felt like that just said a little bit more about Utah than anything else, but this is the St. Mary's team that you know is going to be playing at one of the slowest tempos in all of college basketball. Currently, St. Mary's is outside the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I do think that that's going to be rising up a little bit, and with St. Mary's just being a little bit out of sorts thus far this season, I do think that that will keep Cleveland State lively in this game, getting 14 plus. Going to be taking the points with Cleveland State, semi-total 125.5, so also going in on the under. This is the last game on the normal odds Vegas betting board before we hit the extra game. 663, 664. Washington is going to be playing against Montana State, and Montana State is a 16.5 to a 17-point underdog, and your total between 143.5 and 144. I did set Washington as just a 12-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Montana State. With Montana State, it has been trials and tribulations to begin the season, but I do like what they're getting out of Brian Garaki. He has come up from the non-D1 ranks, and he has been tremendous with 13.5 points on 36% three-point shooting. Part of the reason why Montana State has been so inconsistent has been they've been missing Patrick McMahon, one of their best sharpshooters the past season plus in terms of the last 4 games, and he's probably going to be out of the fold once again. But I do feel like they're finding their footing, especially with having Robert Ford III just be unafraid to get some boards. He's only 6 feet tall, but he's been able to log about 11 points, 8 boards, 3 assists, and he did a lot of this at Idaho State as well. You go back to the 2020-21 season, he's had the last few seasons robbed by injuries. He was able to log 7+ rebounds per game, so this is actually sustainable with them. For Montana State, they've also done a nice job of not beating themselves. Only about 9.5 turnovers per game. Now, other than Mr. Robert Ford III, they don't have anyone else that's giving you north of 4 rebounds per game, and that is going to be a bit costly against a Washington team in which they've got a whole bunch of size. But even though you've got Froning Kempadog, even though you've got Braxton Maya, these guys that stand north of 6'10", the only guy that's right now logging north of 5 rebounds per game is Keon Brooks, and I just can contribute that to nothing other than bad coaching. I mean, man, it's a Washington team that has been playing at one of the more up-tempo paces in all of college basketball. How in the heck are these guys like Kempadog and company not logging more rebounds? You do have a good do-it-all player in Paul Mulcahy. He's really taking the load off of everyone else in the roster in general. 9 points, 6 assists, 4.5 rebounds per game. But for Severe Wheeler, he does give out 7 assists per game, but he also makes opponent plays as well. 3.3 turnovers per game while shooting a ghastly 23.5% from three-point range. Washington completely outclasses Montana State, but Washington makes so many mind-numbing mistakes that they have a big-time tendency to cost themselves, and this has just been a very inconsistent team in general that has given up 83+ points in 3 out of their last 5 games. You got on the flip side, a Montana State team that has really been having a tough time with their offense. As for Montana State, against D1 competition, they have yet to break the 70-point plateau. So So it's a good old situation of something's got to give. I set my total at a 144. I do think that Montana State actually does break through a little bit here, and I do think that Washington bumps up their tempo. So at a 143.5, looking at the over with Montana State, set them as a 12-point dog. So looking at the points, now we get the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-501, 306-502. Central Connecticut is on the road facing off against Boston College. Boston College between a 14.5 to a 15.5 point favorite. Totals between 142.5 and 144, and with Central Connecticut, set them as a 16.5 point underdog, so I'm going to be one to lay it with Boston College. Boston College should be able to manhandle this game with Quentin Post down low doing it all. He's been able to log 20.5 points, 8.5 boards. He's a 7-footer that's able to go outside and shoot 48% from three. I think we're going to see a fall off there, and while Jaden Zachary, who 2 seasons ago shot north of 47% from three, is shooting just 23.5% this season, he's done a nice job of being able to dole out the ball. 12 points, 4.8 assists, 2.3 steals per game, going up against a Central Connecticut team that they don't have a single guy that's able to give you north of 5 rebounds per game. You've had Alan Jean Rose along with Kellen Amos combining for about 26.5 points per game, and Jean Rose has been able to shoot 54.5% from the outside. You've also been able to get 45% three-point shooting and right around about 7.5 points per game out of Trey Breland as well, but with the lack of size for Central Connecticut, a team that does a nice job of being able to take care of the ball themselves. They're only turned the ball over right around 10 times per contest, but this is a Central Connecticut State team that they don't necessarily do the world's greatest job of being able to guard from the outside. For Central Connecticut, 304th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. I think that's going to be very costly against a Boston College team that outside of Quentin Post, it's a lot of guard play. It's a lot of guys that just find a way to be able to contribute in general. Claudel Harris, who comes in for Charleston Southern, has been able to give you 13.5 points per game. Prince Alajibi has been able to give you about 7 points, 5 boards. I like what these ancillary pieces have been able to do for this team, and I do think that for Central Connecticut, they just don't have the firepower to be able to match up with this Boston College team, and I think that they get destroyed by Quentin Post down low. So this is a line that I did make with Boston College being a 16.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay it, and did set my total at 134.5. Boston College has been playing a little bit more up-tempo this year, but they're at their core a little bit more of a slow and controlled team, and you do have a Central Connecticut team that they've been looking to play a little bit more up-tempo as well, but this is not a team that's going to be looking to push pace themselves as Central Connecticut, right now 288th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So looking at the under and looking to lay it with Boston College. 306-503, 306-504. Lemoyne is on the road facing off against Army. Army, a slim favorite of 3 to 3.5 points. Totals between 134.5 and 135. I did set Army as the favorite of 4 points. So here to 3.5, I'm going to be willing to lay it. It's an Army squad that has had all sorts of issues with their offense, and this is a Lemoyne team that they were 500 at the D2 level last season, and they are clearly having a tough time implementing the D1 things that they're looking to do right now. As for Lemoyne, Luke Sutherland, who comes over from Siena, be able to do a nice job of being able to contribute about 13.5 points per game, but for Lemoyne, they really don't have anyone that's north of like 6'7" on the roster. They've got one guy that's able to give you north of 4.3 rebounds per game. That'd be Kaim Cleary, who is a 6'6" combo player that comes over from Ball State, 13 points, 6 boards. To the credit of Lemoyne, they've taken care of the ball with 10 turnovers per game, but hasn't really resulted in good looks because they don't have a lot inside it. Charlie Peterson, great name. He's been able to do a nice job down low for Army with about 6 rebounds per game, and unexpectedly for Army, Josh Scovins, as a true freshman, has really stepped up with 10 points, 5.5 boards. It's a Army team that as a whole, they're shooting about 28.5% from three-point range. They've been ghastly with their offense, but for Army, I recognize that it's not necessarily an amazing defense, but they've gotten something going on the defensive side of things as well in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This team is more around about 200th. Meanwhile, for Lemoyne, they're not finding a way to be able to get it going on offense. In terms of their defense, this team is 342nd in the country. I do think that Army holds up on their home floor. I do think that Charlie Peterson able to win that battle down low in what I think is going to be a slow and controlled game. I did set my total at 133, diving in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 3.5 with Army. 306-505, 306-506. Winthrop is going to be playing against the Queens NC. Queens NC is a 6.5 to a 7.5 point underdog with a total between 156 and 157. I did set my total at 147.5. I'm going to be looking at the under, and the biggest reason why is that Winthrop, even though they are a pretty efficient offense, they really do slow down their tempo. This team has been outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, you've got a Queens NC team that they've just been a little bit all over the place this year, which is why I did set Winthrop as a 7.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the 6.5 to 7 that I'm seeing out there. It is a Winthrop squad that has had a little bit of a tough time down low. This last year, you were able to have right around about 16 points, 8 boards out of Kelton Tulford. He's down to about 13 points and 4 boards per contest, but Alex Zimmerman, who comes in from Bucknell, he's been their main rebounder with about 6 rebounds, and it's resulted in Winthrop playing a little bit better on defense. Now, they had only up to go as they were a bottom 30 team last year in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. It's a Winthrop team that's still far from amazing on defense at about 230th, but certainly improvement has been made. You've got a Queens NC team that has lost a little bit of rebounding from a season ago, but they still have some nice versatility with VJ McLaurin doing a solid job throwing their 6.5 rebounds per game. He and AJ McKee have been able to combine for about 29 points per game, with McLaurin shooting 40% from 3. Queens is turning the ball over about 12 times per contest. They're still waiting for Gavin Raines to get back in the fold. Otherwise, they would probably have a little bit more just down low in terms of rebounding in general. And they have been looking a little bit more as the season has went along to Dayton Albury, who's been able to do a nice job contributing about 14.5 points, 4.5 assists per game. But with Winthrop, so having Kason Harrison, who has an assist to turnover ratio north of 3, he's been able to shoot about 38.5% from 3. Winthrop as a whole, they're shooting 35.5% from distance. I do think that they get it done against a Queens NC team that has their numbers very much built up on the fact that they have played a few non-Division I opponents. It is a Queens team that has been all over the place in terms of their offense, as in their last 3 games against Division I opponents, they have scored 61 points or fewer. Meanwhile, you've got a Winthrop team that they've been able to do a little bit of a better job on defense, giving up 70 or fewer in 3 out of their last 5 games. So it is a spot where I did set my total at 147.5. I do think that Winthrop going to be able to do a nice job down low and overall in the backcourt, so want to lay up to 7 with Winthrop and going to be taking a look at the under. 306.507, 306.508. You've got Navy on the road facing off against George Washington. Old George has to face an entire Navy by himself while laying between 11.5 and 12.5 points. Total on this game is 143. Talk about courage from our good friend George to take on an entire Navy by himself like this. Man, bless his heart. And I did set George Washington as a 13-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. This is a Navy team that they once again are doing a relatively solid job on defense. They do a nice job of making games yucky and slow. This Navy team just has absolutely no way of scoring the ball whatsoever. And you're going to be seeing a lot of sad games from Navy this season. They've got one player averaging north of 8.2 points per game. Austin Bengini has been able to give you about 11.5 points, 3.2 assists, but for Navy, they're shooting 23.5% from 3. I think that'll tick up a little bit, but I'm not seeing where the outside shooting is coming from. You've got one guy pulling in there north of 4.5 rebounds per game, as you've gotten about 7.5 boards, 8 points per game out of Donovan Draper. Meanwhile, for George Washington, James Bishop III. Talk about a guy that's able to put the team on his back. 20 points, 5 assists, shooting 39.5% from 3, but past that, you've got Max Smith-Edwards, Darren Buchanan, combined for 29 points. Both of these guys give you north of 5.5 rebounds per game. Now with George Washington, you've got 3 players that log north of 13 plus points per contest, and then from there, there's a big fall off in production. But one of those guys that doesn't score a lot is the Auburn transfer, Babatunde Ekingbola. He comes over and he has been able to do a tremendous job down low with 4.5 boards, 2.8 blocks per game, so Navy's going to have a tough time down low. Navy has their issues being able to shoot from the outside, and now they go up against a George Washington team that is really looking to push tempo. George Washington, a top 10 team in terms of total possessions per game, but on top of being fast, George Washington has actually been able to do quite a solid job on defense. They had a bit of a hiccup over the weekend against South Carolina, but all in all, they're about 65th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I do think that this game gets bogged down a little bit, but flat out, I just don't think that Navy does their part with this total. I set my total at 139, diving in on the under of George Washington, made them a favorite of 13 points. So want to lay up to 12.5 with our good friend George and taking a look at the under. 306.509, 306.510. It is UNC Wilmington on the road facing off against Kennesaw State. We give our ode to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls. As for Asheville, they find themselves as a 3 to 3.5 point underdog with a total between 164 and 164.5. I set UNC Asheville as the 1.5 point favorite, so going to be willing to ride with them outright on the money line. This Asheville team has the best player in it in Drew Pember. He's at 6'11", capable of popping threes at a north of 35% clip. If you combine the last 2 seasons of results, he's been a little bit down this year. Last year, he had 21 points, 9 boards, 2.5 blocks per game. That's down to about 1.6 blocks, 6.5 boards, and 17 points per game, but still, all in all, has been a very effective player, and he's got a lot around him to be able to help out. Caleb Burgess has an assist to turnover turnover ratio that is north of 3.5. You've been able to have Fletcher Aby really bomb from the outside at 48% three-point shooting with 13.5 points per game. And for UNC Asheville, last year, the biggest kryptonite of the team is that they couldn't take care of the ball. They're down to about 11.5 turnovers per game, so they've been much more precise on that front. Meanwhile, you've got a Kennesaw State team that is currently number 1 in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I do think that is going to be falling down just a little bit for Kennesaw State. This team has been playing against a bunch of up-tempo competition, so I do think that that's a little bit of a product of it. Devin Robinson has been able to do a nice job down low with 9.5 boards, 13 points per game, but I don't think that he's going to be any sort of challenge for Drew Pember. And for Kennesaw State, they lose a lot of their good scorers like Chris Youngblood and company from a season ago, so they're only shooting about 29% from three-point range. Been able to get about 11 points, 4 boards out of Quincy Amiyokpa. He's been able to do a nice job contributing. And then Simeon Kotel has come in after being a reserve a season ago that shot 38% from 3 off the bench, and he's become their primary guy. 2 steals, 3 assists, 17.5 points per game, but I do think that with UNC Asheville, all the balance that they've got in the backcourt, they're going to be able to get it done, and I do think that for Asheville, they're going to play a lick of defense here as well, and I think that Kennesaw State starting to find out that this very, very rambunctious style probably not going to work out for them moving forward. They have given up 77-plus points in each of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, you've got an Asheville team that has actually given up fewer than 70 in each of their last 2 games if you count what we saw in regulation, because one of their games went to overtime against Wofford. So you throw that out, they have actually given up 70 points or fewer in 3 of their last 4 games that have ended in regulation. So this is a spot where I did set my total at 163.5. Here to 164, diving in on the under, and won't take UNC Asheville right on the money line. Set them as a 1.5 point favorite. 306.511, 306.512. Mississippi Valley State hits the road face off against Liberty. Old Liberty is a 30.5 to a 31.5 point favorite. Total on this game is 133. Set my line at 30. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Mississippi Valley State. For Mississippi Valley State, we've seen them rise up a little bit. They force overtime against Pacific. You've got a nice go-to scorer in Raekwon Brown, who's giving you 15 points, 4.5 boards per contest. You're starting to see a little bit of a heartbeat from this team. Now, for this bunch, they're still shooting 28.5% from 3. They're turning the ball over 16.5 times per game. They're a bottom 30 team in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis, going up against a Liberty team that is shooting as a collective 40% from 3 with 10 turnovers per game. But this is not some sort of an up-tempo Liberty team. They themselves are in the bottom 40 in terms of total possessions per game. It's become a whole is greater than some of its parts team with Mr. Darius McGee gone from a season ago, though Joe Van Zandt has been a nice designated rebounder for the team at just 6'3". He's been able to log about 7.5 rebounds per game. I do like the point forward in Kyle Rode, 18 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. He and Keaton Menifee, who comes over from Bowling Green, both shooting about 43.5% from 3-point range with 6 assists between the two of them. Even guys like Shiloh Robinson, Zach Cleveland, they just do a really nice job of knowing the role. And for Liberty, they're going to be able to win this game. They're going to be able to win this game easily. I just think with how slowly they play, winning this game by a differential of north of 30 points is a big ask. So I did set my line at 30. I'm going to be willing to take the points in this ordeal, and I did set my total at 128.5. You've got a Liberty team that is highly efficient on offense, but once again, one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. I just don't know if Mississippi Valley State, with them really having nothing outside their main scorer in Raekwon Brown, going to do their part on this total. So looking at the under and going to be willing to take north of 30 with Mississippi Valley State. 306.513, 306.514. Columbia is going to be playing us to Lafayette. Lafayette finds themselves as underdogs of 7.5 points. 135.5 to 136.5 is your total, and with Lafayette, I did set them as an underdog of 6 points, so I'm going to be willing to take these points. You got a Lafayette team that, once again, is playing relatively slowly in comparison to a season ago, and you got a Columbia team that is going to have the best point guard out there on the floor, Geronimo Rubio de la Rosa. He's able to give you 2.5 assists, 14 points per game, shooting 41% from 3-point range, but what I think is going to keep Lafayette in this game, their 7-footer and Justin Vanderbaan, who came over from Boston College a few seasons ago. He's done a nice job with his versatility, with about 9.5 points, 4.5 boards. He's become a nice rim protector with 2 blocks per game. It's a Lafayette team that has been rough in terms of their 3-point shooting. They're shooting just 29% from the outside, going up against a Columbia team that they're playing at more of a mid-tempo pace thus far this season, right around 120th in terms of total possessions per game, while Lafayette more in the neighborhood about 240th. But for Columbia, this is not a team that necessarily does a great job down low themselves. They don't have that one guy that's really going to push you over the top, while Lafayette has each of their top 4 scorers giving you at least 4.3 rebounds per game. Now, for Columbia, you do have Blair Thomas. So we have log about 6 boards, 7 points per game, and then you got Zeke Adine Badri, who's been able to be very versatile at about 6'9", 6'10", shooting 43% from 3. Something I do like about Columbia is that they hit their free throws. They shoot about 80% at the charity stripe. Pretty much every player that averages at least 6.5 points per game, sans Adine Badri, has been able to shoot at least 71.5% at the free throw line, which is a big plus for them. But Lafayette does a little bit of a better job taking care of the ball. I like what Eric Sonnenberg has been able to do in terms of his 4.5 boards per contest, and then Mark Butler has been an elevator as well. Not a guy that's able to score a lot for the Lafayette bunch, but he's given out 3.7 assists to about 1.3 turnovers per game. I do think that Lafayette going to get this game played at their little bit of a slower tempo, so I did set my total at a 136. I'm going to be taking a look at the 136.5 under as this opened up at 137, and with this spread, I set mine at a 6, so taking 7.5 with Lafayette and the under. 306, 515, 306, 516. High Point hopes to not be a low point. They play us Western Carolina. Western Carolina is an underdog of 1 to 1.5 points. Your total is between 154 and 155, and with High Point, I did set them as a 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them on this very tight line with Western Carolina. They are without a question going to have the best player in this game, as you've got Vontravious Woolbright doing it all, as he's been able to roll up 21.5 points, 12 rebounds, 4.5 assists. He does turn the ball over 3.5 times per game, but that'll happen when you've got a very ball-dominant guy. But I would like to see a little bit more of Trey Jackson, who was a top scorer at 42.5% three-point shooting with 16 points per game a season ago. He's just been a little bit all over the place thus far this season, and I do think that lack of balance is going to be hurting Western Carolina against a High Point team that has really gotten nice contributions across the board. You've now got 4 separate guys giving you at least 13 points per game. Keza Gifa has done a nice job with 13 points, 3.5 assists per game, while Duke Miles gives you 4 assists, 18 points. Both of these guys shoot about 36% from 3. Abdoulaye Thiam, the main holdover from a season ago, has been able to shoot about 41.5% from the outside. You've been able to get about 8 boards, 13.5 points per game out of Kamani Hamilton. So it's a High Point team that has also been able to do a much better job of hitting the glass as far this season. And for High Point, last year they were really getting doomed by turnovers, north of 14 per contest. They have cut that down to more like 11 per game this season. High Point not quite as fast as they were a season ago, but still a relatively up-tempo team going up against a Western Carolina team that they have had one of the biggest tempo shifts in all of college basketball. Not that they were playing at absolute burner-like speed a season ago, but they're down to 300th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and I do think that High Point is showing that they're able to play a little bit more defense. Now, they have chosen to go much more up-tempo. A little bit of that has been the competition that they played, but a few nights ago against Morgan State, they give up just 59 points in that game, and it is a Western Carolina team that has given up themselves 65 points or fewer in 3 of their last 5 games. So I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a lower scoring game. Did set my total at a 148.5, diving in on the under, but with High Point made them a 2.5 point favorite. I think that they're a little bit more balanced, so I'm going to be willing to take High Point in this spot, willing to lay up to 2 with them, and going to be diving in on the under. 36-5-17, 36-5-18. Charlotte is going to be playing us as Stetson. Stetson finds themselves as an 8 to a 9 point underdog with your total between 132.5 and 133.5. And with Charlotte, I did set them as an 8 point favorite, so now catch a 9. I'm going to be taking a look at those points. It's a Stetson team that has over the last 2 seasons been a bottom 100 team in both seasons in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But how about Jalen Blackman being able to take over games with 21 points, 2 assists on 45% three-point shooting? Last year was more of a mid-30s three-point shooter, so I do think that that's going to be falling off a little bit. And then you've got Alec Oglesby, who's been about a 36% three-point shooter in his own right. But what I do like about this Stetson team is that you've got a little bit more down low. I do think that moving forward, the Minnesota transfer and Trayton Thompson, who's been able to give you about 5.5 points, 4.5 boards, and a block per game, it's going to be able to give you a scourge more. Meanwhile, Abengester Stay, he's been doing a nice job with 8.5 rebounds, block and a half per contest, was a little bit of an afterthought the last 2 seasons, and has really paid up for this team, along with Stephon Swenson, giving you about 6.6 assists per contest. He's one of the best floor generals out there. Meanwhile, you've got a Charlotte bunch that has really been looking to Nick Graves to be able to dish it out, as he's been able to give the team right around 3 assists, 10.5 points per game. It's a Charlotte team that last year they were very efficient with their three-point shooting, and even though they've cut down on the turnovers from season ago, they're only shooting about 30% from 3, and they've got one player giving you north of 4.5 rebounds per game. That would be Igor Milicic, 13.5 points, 9.5 boards, and he's been your main three-point shooter as well, 44% from the outside. But with the Charlotte bunch, they are one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. I don't think that they're going to be able to take advantage of that Achilles heel of Stetson being a little bit weak down low, as you've got 2 of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. It's a Charlotte team that, in terms of points allowed, on a per possession basis. They certainly do have a little bit of an upper hand on defense, ranking about 63rd, but I just don't know if they do their part in terms of being able to score in the backcourt to be able to cover this number. And as a result, I did set my total on 128. I'm going to be diving in on the under. And with Stetson, won't take anything north of 8 with them. 306, 519, 306, 520 is going to be the DK Network write-up pick. This is NC Central. They hit the road. They're facing off against Virginia. Virginia is between a 20.5 and a 22.5 point favorite, and your total between 122.5 and 124. I did set Virginia as a 27.5 point favorite. I typically don't lay these big numbers with my write-up, but I'm going to be willing to do it here. I am going to be willing to lay it with Virginia, and the biggest reason why is you take a look at Virginia. Since the start of the 2016 NCAA tournament, they have been involved in 22 games involving a spread between 18 and 25 points. They've actually went 15-7 against the spread in a lot of these. That's a trend, and you don't want to be blindly backing trends, so here's a little bit more on it. You've got a Virginia team that has been just absolutely tenacious on defense, even though they're back in the bottom 5 in the country. In terms of total possessions per game, they're now 9th in the country. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, because they're a top 10 team in being able to take the ball away, they have really done a nice job of being able to generate steals, and they go up against an NC Central team that they're just a little bit out of sorts in general in terms of their backcourt. They lose a lot of guys from a season ago now. To their credit, NC Central only turning the ball over about 11 times per game, but now you're having to rely upon the duo of Puboy King along with Darius Harris to really be able to contribute, as they've been able to give you about 29.5 points per game, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range for an NC Central team that, all in all, they're shooting about 30.5% from three-point range, but they also lose their big man in Brendan Medley-Bacon from a season ago. Virginia, if you can beat them, it's probably going to be down low, and Emmanuel Izabooner is the only guy that's giving you north of 5 rebounds per game, comes in from the Big South. He's been able to give you 5.5 rebounds per game, and for Virginia, right now you're getting a combined 5.4 steals per game out of Reese Beekman along with Ryan Dunn, and Dunn has been able to get her drawn at 6'8", doing it all, 10 points, 6 half boards, not really shooting it well from three-point range, but that's why you've got Isaac McNeely shooting 54.5% from three, and Jacob Groves shooting 45.5% from the outside, while Beekman gives you 6 assists to about 1.4 turnovers per game. Virginia, very surgical with their offense, 8.8 turnovers per game out of them. You've also been able to have guys like Andrew Rohde be able to step up as well. For Virginia, they have been able to pull off all but 3 of their wins by a margin of at least 22 points. I think they take it to NC Central here, so I did set my line at a 27.5 with an NC Central team that has made the NCAA tournament a little bit in the past. I think that they just get overwhelmed by a Virginia team that's doing a tremendous job of being able to generate these steals, and it's an NC Central team that they themselves are outside of the top 300 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, while Virginia, they shoot 38.8% from 3. So I think that they're going to get beat in a wide variety of ways. My DK Network write-up pick is going to be on Virginia laying the number, and did set my total at 127.5. I think that Virginia is going to be able to light up this NC Central defense. So looking at the over and my write-up, that is going to be laying the points with Virginia. 306, 521, 306, 522. Florida plays also Merrimack. Merrimack is a 20.5 to a 21.5 point underdog. So it's between 146.5 and 147.5. Did set Florida as a 21 point favorite. It's actually opened up at a 22, mostly seeing 21.5 out there right now as I do this, and I personally would rather take the 21.5 rather than lay the 20.5 with Merrimack. They just come at you with that, I always call it psycho zone, but it's an amoeba zone that forces so many turnovers, and I do think that it's going to be very, very difficult for Florida to be able to process that, even with their great guards. They now have Zion pulling back and fold, and in the 4 games that he's been back, 5.5 assists, 13.5 points per game, and that takes the onus off of Walter Clayton, who early on this season was turning over the ball when he was the main ball handler. It's part of the reason why Florida currently is turning the ball over right around about 13.5 times per game. It's a Florida team that is a solid shooting team. They're not an amazing three-point shooting team, shooting about 33% from the outside. Riley Kugel, Walter Clayton, along Torres Samuels, these 3 guys, they've been able to do a nice job with a combined about 44 to 45 points per game. And Samuel, he's been able to give you about 8 rebounds per game. You've also got Micah Hanglon down low, giving you 7 rebounds per game. But with Hanglon, he has missed each out of the last 2 games. I am thinking that he's going to be out the full once again, and that does help out a Merrimack team, in which they always have a little bit of a lack of size. They've got a bit more this year with Jordan DeCock. He's a 6'6", a little bit of a combo player, chipping in there 18 points. Last year shot it well from 3, this year not so much, but he has been able to give you about 2.5 steals per game. Adam Clark towards the top of all of college basketball with his 3.2 steals per contest. And down low, you've got Samba Diallo, coupled with Brian Itaminu. Both of these guys are 6'6", 6'7". They've got versatility with about 9.5 rebounds per game. They do a nice job fitting in with this just interesting Merrimack defense. And Merrimack has cranked up their tempo. They are turning the ball over 14 times per game, but they're still a pretty rock-solid defense. So I do think that this is going to leave things very much out of sorts. I did set my total at 137. I'm going to be diving in on the under, as I do think that Merrimack, moving forward, they are going to be looking to play a little bit more slowly. And with this number still being at 21.5, going to be taking the points with Merrimack to go along with the under. And we wrap things up with 3 of 6, 523, 3 of 6, 524. Gonzaga plays host to Arkansas Pine Bluff. Pine Bluff is an underdog of 34 points with a total between 165 and 166.5. I actually like the fact that Gonzaga is a top 75 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And though you've got an Arkansas Pine Bluff team that's willing to run it and gun it, I think that we went a little bit too high here. I'm going to be taking a look at the under, but willing to take the points with Pine Bluff as well. Did set them as a 28.5 point underdog, guys. For Pine Bluff, you've really got the most prolific backcourt in the SWAC. You've got a duo that involves Kylan Milton along with Rashad Williams. I still remember Rashad Williams when he was at Oakland during, I think it was the 2019-20 season. He attempted 12.7 threes per game. Most we have seen in an NCAA season, really, since they kept track of those numbers. With Milton and Williams, they're combining for 39 points on 31.5% three-point shooting, with the two of them being able to give you about 6.5 assists per game. Now, for Pine Bluff, they do turn the ball for 13 times per game, but they are playing at a top 50 pace in terms of total possessions per game. And Gonzaga has actually been a very mid-tempo team, and they don't necessarily have that one go-to scorer. Now, what I do like about this Gonzaga team is that they've got 5 out of their top 7 guys all being able to log at least 4.4 rebounds per game, so you've got a lot of options there. Gotten a little bit more than I was expecting out of a few of their freshmen. Jussie Stromer was able to step up in that game in Las Vegas against USC. Braden Huff is able to give you about 11.5 points per game, but I think the big key is you need Ryan Nembhard to cut down on the turnovers a little bit. 3.3 turnovers per contest. That's been a little bit rough, and the overall selection on his shots has not been great as well. Shooting about 23% from three-point range. Now, Graham Ike along with Anton Watson are combined to shoot about 45% from three with 28 points per game. With Ike, he's really showing off some range that has me upping Gonzaga a little bit, but I do think that we're going to see those three-point numbers for those to cool off a little bit. Meanwhile, I do think that there's going to be a little bit of positivity with Ryan Nembhard. Certainly, Gonzaga is going to be able to win the battle on glass. Ismail Pleat for this Arkansas Pine Bluff team is able to give you 5.5 rebounds per game. He doesn't stand a chance against Ike, but I think we've gone a little bit too far with this total. We've seen Pine Bluff be able to hold in there against a team like a Oklahoma. I believe that they knocked off TCU on the road last season. Either that or they took them to overtime. So this team has been unafraid of these circumstances, and I think that the line has gotten a little bit too high. I did set my line at a 28.5. We'll take 34 with Pine Bluff. Set my total at 160.5. So also diving in on the under, and now we'll wrap things up for the Tuesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family podcast. A big thanks to Curtis Rogers over there at 710 Seattle Sports for joining me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, whatever you for this podcast, do have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at unit_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these in the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and I'm coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season. That means I'm going to be coming at you guys once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.